A disaster unprecedented in history might occur. Almost simultaneously thinking of this terrifying result, several board members couldn't help but take a deep breath, and their expressions turned grim. The more burdens one carries, the less likely one is to make radical decisions. Those board members who bear the future of the entire community are precisely the individuals with the heaviest burdens. Even knowing that going all out is the right choice, once thinking about the potential consequences of their decisions, one might unconsciously step back and strive to find a less favorable but sufficiently safe outcome. Thus, even though Leon went alone into the realm of the dead, killed the frequently provocative overlords of the dead realm, and rescued all captured cleaners, such actions were undeniably encouraging. Yet, several board members still found it challenging to voice their approval. After all, while gaining the upper hand temporarily feels satisfying, the territories left empty by the fleeing overlords of the dead realm require manpower from the Zodiac Bureau to fill. If the worst-case scenario arises, where all conscious overlords of the dead realm have fled, 14 true god-level cleaners would need to voluntarily leave the living world and enter the realm of the dead to completely occupy their vacant territories. For the Zodiac Bureau, which already struggles with an extreme shortage of manpower above the true god level, this kind of prolonged personnel shift is undoubtedly quite fatal. Actually, everyone doesn't need to be too pessimistic. Looking at the board members who became speechless and collectively displayed worry on their faces, Leon tentatively spoke. I actually have a way that should perfectly solve the issue of the lingering dead. ? Upon hearing Leon's words, the board members inside and outside the mirror simultaneously looked over and then looked at each other, finding that their expressions showed evident uncertainty. They weren't doubting Leon's ability to achieve it. The newly appointed Aquarius director isn't one to make empty promises. Besides, other board members have already verified his problem-solving abilities through previous near-impossible tasks. What they are worried about now is whether this Aquarius director, who is as capable of solving issues as he is of causing them, might bring about even more fatal new problems after successfully solving the current one. Rest assured, this time it's really a good method. Leon, somewhat aware of how the other board members perceive him, didn't get angry at their mutual glances. Instead, he looked earnestly at Taurus and spoke sincerely. Does Your Excellency Taurus have any living demons? Or any other beings with souls? Demons? Facing Leon's sudden request, Taurus hesitated for a moment before nodding and then gestured towards the direction of the forge. Amidst hysterical howls, 2 blood-red demons covered in scales quickly crawled out from an idle forge, moving uncontrollably towards Leon. Would these 2 blood-bramble demons do? Taurus said slightly apologetically. To process the materials you brought back from the Witch Kingdom, I have moved almost everything from my forge, leaving only these 2. If they don't work, I will ask Cancer Director to help you get some. Enough. Leon briskly pulled out the cutting silver dagger, slashed it decisively to kill the 2 menacing demons, and caught their souls as they separated from their bodies before the abyss could capture them. He then kicked the right demon hard in the rear. Given that it was his first time using the I excel at superhuman badge, and additionally super wasn't human but demon, Leon wasn't sure of the outcome. So he intentionally applied extra force, stamping a dusty gray shoe print on the right rear of the demon. Soon, the superhuman badge in the slot flickered lightly, and the demon's soul, forcibly defined as a dead being by the Guardian of Death, suddenly knelt on the ground, roaring angrily, turned sharply, and monstrously shouted,
Dam numans.
You are welcome. In the dumbfounded gaze of several board members, this blood-bramble demon, hailed for blood, courage, and fury, origins from the fiercest rage hell. The red tint in its eyes faded instantly, becoming clear. More incomprehensibly, its fierce face suddenly softened, and the mouth corner torn by years of screaming lifted in an eerie yet gentle arc. Its voice, still terribly grating, sounding, Thank you, dying by the hands of such great humans. My life bears no regrets. Watching the demon post-Leon kick, seemingly brainwashed by some strange anomaly, turning calm and harmonious, the Sagittarius director on the opposite end of the mirror couldn't help but widen his eyes, unbelievingly reminding, That's it? You are from the batch of demons regurgitated by cancer last time, detained for decades, barely out and got eliminated by us. Aren't there any grudges? Why hold grudges? The demon blinked its now clear 6 pairs of eyes and replied puzzled. Being captured was a matter when I was alive. Now I'm dead. Why bother you with these things? Moreover, my clan and I attempted several invasions into the living world, igniting more than one war, causing many human deaths, even killing a cleaner myself. So, from this perspective, I owe you humans. You ought to treat me more cruelly to offset the damage I caused you. You're quite reasonable. Watching this blood bramble demon peacefully suggesting cruelty upon itself, after moving his lips, the Sagittarius director turned to Leon, his expression trying hard to maintain while a chill couldn't help but arise within. Given the blood bramble demon's birth in perpetual rage, ceaseless anger, and combat is their essence. These deeply rooted soul traits, remarkably whitewashed post-Leon's kick, such capability to forcibly twist a soul's will is truly. This ability came post-destroying Zhanhui Mountain and only works on the dead. Knowing Sagittarius director's skeptical nature well, upon noticing his complex gaze, Leon swiftly explained and further added, not only for direct kicks, even the footprint I leave can dissipate a deceased's heart's obsession. The longer they touch it, the faster these obsessions vanish. Even footprints. Listening, the board members couldn't help but exchange glances. Then Taurus, eyes sparkling with joy, spoke. Leon, how long can this ability last? Should be very, very long. Leon contemplated and uncertainly replied. As long as my footprint remains unbroken, it might continue indefinitely. Always. Upon hearing, board members couldn't help but rejoice, while Sagittarius director located in the realm of the dead, looking at the blocked souls on the no-return path couldn't contain the excitement, clenching his fists. Doesn't that imply, by reconnecting the severed no-return path, having Leon stamp along it, all overlords in the realm of the dead can be replaced? Hold on a minute. Trying hard to suppress the emerging joy in his heart, the Archer director cautiously proposed after calling a halt. I don't doubt what Aquarius says, but this matter is too significant. If anything goes wrong, it will affect over 100 million deceased, so we still need to be a bit cautious. For those overlords of the dead realm, we still need to focus on capturing for now. As for other matters, let's solve the problem of the dead realm first and have Aquarius walk the no-return path for real to confirm that his abilities can be permanently maintained. After hearing the Archer director's words, Leon nodded and was the first to respond. Testing it is fine, I have no objections. Although he was confident that the badge's effects wouldn't cause any issues, and a superhuman would definitely be superhuman, Leon, being naturally conservative, did not dislike the Archer director's caution. Since Leon, the staunch hawk, did not object, the naturally more conservative Taurus director and Capricorn director obviously wouldn't voice any objections. Thus, the whole matter was solidly decided. Then, as if he recalled something, Taurus director frowned and asked Archer director, by the way, does the negotiation at the Sage's cemetery still hold? After Leon went down and took out the wailing puppet, Grandma Crow-Eye won't have other ideas, will she? That I'm not sure about. Looking at the empty nest of crows of death report on both sides of the gate of the deceased, Archer director shook his head somewhat uncertainly. Before I could arrive after knowing about the situation, she had already abandoned the nest of crows of death report and left. She probably went to the latter half of the no-return path with the other overlords of the dead realm, and will probably have her minions contact me after they've discussed a result. But her attitude doesn't matter anymore. Pausing slightly at this point, the Archer director glanced at the amicable-looking blood-thorn demon across the mirror, then squinted and said, whether or not they want to continue the talks, and regardless of whether Aquarius's abilities work, we must cripple the dead realm this time, especially the patrol mountain woman, who secretly intercepted the souls of the cleaners, using the rules of Zhanhui Mountain in the past. She must die. SSS. As if feeling a chill from the void, a third of Leon shivered involuntarily in the depths of the dead realm. then popped his head out from the patrol mountain woman's chest to look at the silvery white frozen river full of ice spikes beneath her feet, complaining, "Hey, it's so cold in this lousy place. Can't you wear a bit more? Also, even if you don't look very human, you're still a woman, aren't you? And you're just exposing yourself like that? At least cover up a bit with something, won't you?" TSK. Such indecency. Are you never going to stop? Realizing that Leon was intentionally provoking her to make her heart lake expose a flaw so he could continue invading, the patrol mountain woman, nevertheless, let her defenses break against Leon's persistent harassment, gritting her teeth as she reached out, only to unsurprisingly grab nothing. Watching Leon dodge her attack, then pop out from her chest again, winking at her, the patrol mountain woman couldn't help but clench her jaws tighter, her heart nearly bursting with hatred. The food god's mouth is insanely filthy. The earlier provocations that seemed harmless, if coming from anyone else, she would have ignored entirely. But when those words were spat from the food god's mouth, with his loathsome appearance and expression, they somehow gained a bizarre, offensive power, piercing straight to her heart, igniting her rage. What was worse, the food god's wretched mouth wasn't picky, striking anyone who dared approach her, extracting power from each agitated heart lake, disgusting the other overlords of the dead realm to stay far, far away. Upon being asked for the third time about her non-existent parents by the food god, with a thick saliva spat on her forehead, even the resown dough, only a quarter of her body restored, couldn't stand it and hopped away solo, rejecting help from the other overlords of the dead realm. "Speak up." Feeling the deepening degree of erosion, Leon nodded in satisfaction, then continued to exploit the word's betray effect, chuckling as he spoke. "I only destroyed your mountain, not your tongue. Why can't you even talk now?" As if possessed by a reticent Capricorn director, even with nobody responding to him, Leon didn't feel embarrassed but continued his monologue. "By the way, to be honest, I actually owe you a favor, a big one. Question mark. What nonsense are you spouting? Think about it. Aren't you the patrol mountain woman of the dead realm?" Looking up at the guarded face of the patrol mountain woman, Leon added with a chuckle, "Your job is to patrol the mountain, and I've destroyed half of it, reducing your workload by half. Shouldn't you thank me?" Hearing Leon mention the half-destroyed Zhanhui Mountain, the patrol mountain woman couldn't help but feel a sharp pain in her heart, then angrily yelled with reddened eyes, "You! Ugh!" Just when the patrol mountain woman was provoked once again to the brink of cursing out loud, she was hit by a cold wind that chilled her to the core, calming her heart lake, which had been flaming with anger eerily under the gust. "Hee, you can only talk big after all." For some unknown reason, suppressing her surging heart lake briefly, the patrol mountain woman extended her sharp nails, slashing at the skin on her chest, leaving two cross-like fierce wounds, and coldly sneered, "Say whatever you want. After all, you won't be able to speak for much longer." "I won't be able to speak for long?" Upon sensing the ominous chill emanating from the patrol mountain woman's heart lake, confirming that she meant every word, Leon's eyes narrowed, immediately ceasing his erosion and retreating deeper into her heart lake. Even though he sent only a quarter of his soul, took out an overlord of the dead realm, and caused upheaval throughout the dead realm, and remains lodged in the patrol mountain woman's heart lake, tormenting the dead realm's overlords with his mocking presence, Leon has never underestimated the foundation of the dead realm. Though primarily due to its binding with the functions of the dead realm, the fact that they survived through the most powerful era of the Cleaning Bureau, successfully avoiding the grasps of 3 consecutive directors, and are now targeting the Bureau and the mortal world proactively, these overlords of the dead realm likely have a formidable trump card. And the sudden freezing of the patrol mountain woman's heart lake just now, interrupting his erosion, was probably the manifestation of that trump card. Perceiving the danger, Leon decisively stopped his corruption and silently hid in the deepest part of the mountain woman's heart lake, while the overlords of the dead realm arrived at the source of the silver-frozen river one after another. "It's about time." Squinting at the glacier upstream of the frozen river, the faceless man turned and said to the mountain woman, "You go ahead and take a bite, Freeze the food god inside Heart Lake, and then we can talk about what's next. All right. As if she had already expected this, the mountain woman showed no surprise on her face. She stepped over the dark ice spikes on the silver-frozen river, heading toward the distant, pitch-black giant glacier. When she finally reached the foot of the glacier, under the wary gaze of Leon, his mount, whom he had only tamed a few days ago, astonishingly dug out a piece, pitch black. No, not black. Momentarily risking exposure, Leon took a brief glance at the ice block in the mountain woman's hand and felt a shudder run down his spine. The ice block excavated by the mountain woman from the glacier was not actually black, but rather a very deep, dark red. A somber, decaying blood red. What made Leon instinctively feel uneasy was that the ice block in the mountain woman's hand emitted more than just a sense of cold. The chill, capable of freezing the entire Heart Lake, was merely the surface symptom of this aura. The true nature of these ice blocks represented something closer to the essence of death, a bizarre existence of finality and silence, like the bloody aura emitted by death itself. After the mountain woman bit off a corner of the blood-colored black ice and swallowed it with great difficulty, Leon, forced to taste a bit as well, couldn't help but entertain an extremely peculiar thought. If death itself could bleed, then this might be the taste. Hiss! After uncontrollably shivering, the blood drained completely from her face, and her lips turned blackish from the cold, making her look deader than the dead. The mountain woman first tried to feel her Heart Lake, then finally revealed a painful smile. Frozen. Done. He's not moving at all. Phew. Seeing the relieved expression on the mountain woman's face, the 13 overlords of the dead realm at the source of the frozen river also relaxed slightly in response. For nothing else, the pressure the food god brought to everyone during this period was indeed a bit terrifying. Those who were tragically devoured at the gate of the deceased and are still queuing for resurrection, the watchful death hounds, need not be mentioned. Just the turmoil from 2 days ago, which disrupted half of the dead realm, was enough to make all the overlords of the dead realm uneasy. Facing the premeditated assault of the food god, the reticulated hind, the strongest on the no-return path's first half, got blown apart on the spot in a single encounter. If not for the mountain woman pulling it out in time, it would have joined the death hounds in companionship by now. And the mountain woman, whose power ranked in the top 3 among the overlords of the dead realm, was also heavily battered by him, suffering full body cracks, half of Zhanhui Mountain collapsed, and her own Heart Lake was eroded, almost turning into a puppet at their command. Fortunately, there were 3 overlords of the dead realm in Zhanhui Mountain at that time. If it weren't for the faceless man weakening from the sidelines, forcibly dragging the food god down from the pillar god level, mountain woman and the reticulated hind alone would have likely been doomed. At this rate, they'd lose 3 overlords or more before even engaging in war with the Council of Clearance. Even knowing this is only a quarter of the food god's soul hiding in the Heart Lake. Whenever his fearsome combat record is recalled, shadows would invariably creep into the minds of all dead realm overlords. And now that the mountain woman consumed the blood of the dead, borrowing death to freeze the food god, it temporarily eased the burden Leon had placed overhead, making the heavy-hearted overlords of the dead realm feel slightly better. Since the issue with the food god is temporarily resolved, let's talk business. After confirming the stillness of her Heart Lake to be akin to death, the faceless man finally relaxed before speaking gravely. Regarding the previous plan to ambush the Council of Clearance outside the Sage's cemetery, do you have any thoughts? Let me put this more bluntly. Seeing the varied expressions yet unspoken words of the overlords of the dead realm, the faceless man sighed and said, "Do you still have the guts to participate in the ambush now?" It's not a matter of courage, but the risk is just too great. Faced with the faceless man's rather blunt questioning, the Death Keeper, wrapped in corpse straps and bloody hair, stood out after a moment of silence and hesitantly spoke. If we actually ambush the Council of Clearance and kill 2 or 3 directors, then there will be no room for negotiation between us and the Council of Clearance. And everyone saw the events from 2 days ago. The food god brought only a quarter of his soul and caused this much chaos. If we completely fall out with the Council of Clearance and fail to capture the food god, letting him escape, then we might never see peace again. Although the Death Keeper did not finish his sentence, all the overlords of the dead realm present understood his meaning. Judging by the food god's displayed abilities during the chaos 2 days ago, if he manages to escape intact with even a fragment of his soul, he could recreate the disaster and randomly kill a few of us overlords. And if the food god entirely escapes, or his true form wasn't here at all, then a being thrice as terrifying as before would be stalking the dead realm to massacre. Who could bear that? But we must fight. After cautiously spitting out a bit of the blood of the dead ice debris, the trembling mountain woman cried out, gritting her teeth. I faced the food god directly. I understand. When he looks at us, his eyes are like looking at corpses. Bah! Listen to me. The food god could never possibly tolerate us. And he'd never accept surrender. Just a glance tells me he intends to destroy the entire dead realm. There's no room for reconciliation. Having thoroughly spat out the ice debris in her mouth, the mountain woman gradually stopped trembling as she spoke and said with wary eyes, You can ask the faceless man and the reticulated hind. They were both there at the time. Ask them if they felt the same. Upon hearing this, the overlords of the dead realm felt their hearts tighten, and when the faceless man and reticulated hind nodded, even the Death Keeper, who initially opposed the ambush, fell silent. So, we must battle the Council of Clearance with bloodshed after all. But, can we win? Squinting the crow's eyes on both temples, Grandma Crow-Eye frowned and said, Even if we can activate the frozen river, the Council of Clearance's directors have the Star Palace's protection, with numerous life-saving methods. Can Frozen River truly detain the directors who come to negotiate? What is the Frozen River? The Frozen River is... Instinctively answering halfway, Grandma Crow-Eye suddenly stopped, turning her head with a snap, staring as if having seen a ghost at the mountain woman's chest, where the food god was peering out, watching her curiously. You're not frozen? Heh, still okay. In response to Grandma Crow-Eye's exclamation, Leon rubbed his bright red nose from the cold and replied calmly. At first, it was really cold, but you get used to it eventually. How is that possible? Upon hearing Leon's response and seeing him looking as if he hadn't suffered much, the overlords of the dead realm collectively shuddered, like a herd of snakes in a meeting, hissing and gasping incessantly. For the living, the blood of the dead, consumed by the mountain patroller, is 100 times more toxic than the deadliest poison and 1,000 times colder than the iciest ice. Almost solidified, death itself. In the true God system, coming into contact with the solidified blood of the dead is akin to being drawn into the truth domain of a pillar deity-level death. And even those as powerful as the third director of the Clearing Bureau would have little room for resistance. As long as there's still some life in them, once they touch this, they will be quickly eroded and assimilated, and the coldness emitted will freeze them, putting them in a state close to true death. Moreover, even the dead cannot withstand the erosion and freezing intensity, and even the overlords of the dead realm, standing at the pinnacle of death, would be in danger with too much exposure. Yet this living man seems unaffected? Don't ask. If you ask, it might be open, or perhaps it was never closed. Leon glanced at the badge of materialism, lying quietly in the first slot, radiating a steady and intense red glow. He then reversed his hand to mobilize the Heart Lake ability, targeting the turbulent heart lakes of the dozen overlords of the dead realm, drawing a large wave of power from them, then said with a chuckle, No problem, you guys chat away. I'll just listen on the side, and if you really dislike it, I won't interject next time. Is this really about interjecting or not? Seeing Leon's ear poking out of the mountain patroller's chest, only to retreat with a smirk, the faceless man almost broke down on the spot. Hosting the Overlord's meeting was meant to discuss how to ambush the Clearing Bureau and eliminate the Food God, a threat to the entire realm of the dead. Yet the Food God's soul is eavesdropping here throughout. Even if the Food God can't instantly relay the information due to being wrapped by the mountain patroller's soul, still, something feels off. No way. Seeing the deathly pale face of the mountain patroller, all the overlords of the dead realm unanimously decided and shouted to her, "Keep eating. Eat until the food god is frozen. Aye! Hurry up!" Even for the most powerful dead in the realm of the dead, frequent contact with the blood of the dead is extremely painful, but facing the consensus among the overlords of the dead realm, the mountain patroller had to endure. With fear of the damn food god and regret for being involved in this mess, the mountain patroller staggered to the source of the frozen river and directly dug out a fist-sized clump of blood of the dead, forcing herself to swallow it whole. The new blood of the dead had an immediate effect. In the hopeful gaze of the overlords of the dead realm, the ear of the food god, which had been exposed, twitched and quickly retracted. Then, "Sweet!" along with an exclamation that made the overlords of the dead realm change color. A hand, slightly red from the cold, suddenly reached out from the mountain patroller's chest, trembling as it beckoned in the direction of the faceless man. "Increase the intensity." Faced with Leon's blatant provocation, coupled with the constant catalysis of the Heart Lake power, the overlords of the dead realm couldn't help but feel their anger rise, all casting furious glares toward the mountain patroller. "Eat! Keep eating!" Looking at Leon's hand covered in a layer of frost, the faceless man gritted his teeth and yelled, "He's bluffing! Keep eating! Freeze him! Right? Continue!" Under the angry stares from the overlords of the dead realm, the mountain patroller, whose lips were turning blue, took a half-step back, then couldn't help but say, "How about I take him away first? Honestly, even if I don't participate, what are you afraid of?" After cutting off the mountain patroller, the Death Lord shouted with anger, "The food god is living, you're dead. He's now hiding in your heart lake, so when you eat a bit of blood of the dead, it's like he's eating it too. Are you, the dead, not able to withstand more than one living person?" Fair enough. Believing this to be reasonable, convincing herself that the food god in her heart lake was likely bluffing, the mountain patroller nodded, dug out another fist-sized piece of blood of the dead. However, just as she was about to continue, the blood of the dead in her hand was snatched by the faceless man, who shoved a head-sized new ice block in its place. "Eat this. That one's too small. It might not be enough to freeze the food god." Whether it's enough to freeze the food god is unclear, but eating this I might end up half-frozen. Though she wanted to refuse the help from the faceless man, feeling the increasingly lively food god within her heart lake, the mountain patroller, gritting her teeth, held the head-sized black ice chunk and reluctantly swallowed it whole. Swish! With the mountain patroller's reckless move, a terrible chill that paralyzes the soul erupted instantly from her center, forcing all the overlords of the dead realm to retreat. And at the very center of this frigid cold, half her body was coated with frost, particularly in the heart area that received extra attention, which formed a thick ice layer, firmly trapping the food god who was previously at the beck and call. After waiting anxiously for a while and seeing no sign of the food god breaking through the ice, the overlords of the dead realm collectively sighed in relief, but to be safe, the faceless man still advised the mountain patroller, "The food god is too peculiar. You better seal your perception and turn around. What we are going to discuss is too crucial, and even if the food god can't relay the information, it's better to avoid him." If that's the plan, why didn't you just let me leave at the start? Why all this fuss? Although she really wanted to say this, knowing she had angered the crowd, the mountain patroller wisely kept silent, turning around, enduring in silence, and closing her eyes. Everyone. Once it was confirmed she couldn't perceive anything, the faceless man turned to the overlords of the dead realm, reaching out with a palm devoid of fingerprints, gently patting the ice wall behind him with a serious face. "There's no need for me to elaborate on the terror of the food god. This human is a heedless lunatic, acting solely on whims, without considering the consequences. Even knowing the chaos that would ensue in our realm of the dead, he would relentlessly kill without hesitation. The wailing puppet is the perfect example. I'm very certain if we don't liberate the frozen river this time, and go all out against the Clearing Bureau to eliminate this threat, once the food god takes full control of the Clearing Bureau, he will certainly eradicate us. Indeed, after listening to the faceless man, the overlords of the dead realm couldn't help but nod in agreement with the judgment made. Before today, not many of the overlords had interacted with Leon. At most, they only knew of a crazy cleaner. But after witnessing him face the blood of the dead as a living person, the overlords, who had only heard of him before, truly understood what the food god represented. If the opportunity strikes, he would indeed strike lethally. Recalling the look Leon gave them earlier, the overlords couldn't help but exchange glances, seeing deep apprehension in each other's eyes. The gaze of the food god was very peculiar. There was neither apprehension nor disgust, nor much hostility, but it made one shiver. If it had to be described, it was like looking at obstacles blocking the path. If they can't be moved, they can be bypassed. But if they can be moved, you all actually came. Just as the resolve in the overlord's expressions was firming, a slightly angry hoarse voice rose from beneath them. Following that, a small mound of soil suddenly arched up from the pale land on both sides of the frozen river. With slightly awkward expressions, the overlords watched as a man made of pale clay emerged naked from the mound, glanced at the overlords standing beneath the glacier, and questioned with an unsightly expression. "So, have you decided to open the frozen river?" "My lord. First dead one, my lord. My lord. We're sorry." Upon seeing the man formed from clay, the overlords immediately bowed their heads in respect, greeted him, and the clay man motioned for them not to stand on ceremony, then looked up at the towering glacier with a complex expression and said, "Don't call me lord. I merely died a little earlier than you all. I'm unworthy of the title. Faceless man, what do you intend to do?" "First dead one, my lord." After a respectful bow, the faceless man looked down apologetically and said, "I plan to open the frozen river, and open the coffin that holds your body from before, cutting away 1/3 of your flesh, removing your 6 pairs of ribs, taking half of your heart, and then sealing these with the remaining materials of your coffin, and bury them outside the sage's cemetery in advance. When the people from the cleaning bureau step out from there, we will simultaneously destroy these parts of your body, dispersing all the accumulated death, freezing all those from the cleaning bureau." Heh. Upon hearing the faceless man, the naked clay man couldn't help but let out a cold laugh. "How considerate of you to leave some for me, my lord." Responding with a word, the faceless man bowed and explained, "It was you who ground your backbone to dust and paved the way to the no-return path, giving us the life we have today. Our respect for you is genuine, and if there were no other way, we wouldn't—" "Is there truly no other way?" Breaking off the faceless man's words, the first of the dead, with a plain appearance but striking eyes, asked resentfully. "The cleaning bureau's requirement for the realm of the dead is to maintain stable operations. They wouldn't attack you without sensing a true threat, so which side is truly at an impasse?" "All right, there's no need for such redundant words." Motioning the faceless man to stop explaining further, the first dead one's eyes were filled with annoyance as he said, "I oppose your decision. Leaving my body behind was for the purpose of repairs if the no-return path is damaged. Not for you to do this. My lord, please reconsider." The faceless man remained silent, but Grandma Crow-Eye blinked her eyes and sharply pleaded, "You aren't aware of the situation. Right now, we are backed into a corner. If we can't heavily damage the cleaning bureau this time and capture the food god, then in less than 100 years you might never see us again. In a sense, we are your children. Can you really bear to see that happen?" Hearing Grandma Crow-Eye's words, the clay man hesitated slightly, then shook his head once again and said, "No, if you are gone, the cleaning bureau would need to send at least 10 cleaners of true god level to perfectly replace you, which is a price they cannot afford. And back when humanity was at its strongest, the cleaning bureau never did so, and they won't now either. So as long as you approach the talks with sincerity and promise not to interfere in the mortal world anymore." "My lord," interrupting the first dead one's words, an old man with a lantern who had been hiding in the shadows slowly stepped out with a hunched elderly body and said, "We don't want to place our safety in the hands of human mercy. In addition, human beings, with their short and insignificant lives, cannot adhere to promises forever. Glancing at the frost-covered back of the goddess patrol, the old man slowly straightened his spine, his expression calm as still water as he spoke. Even if the current cleaning bureau agrees to make peace with us, decades later, a bureau controlled by the food god might not. Given his style, he is likely to choose to kill us all. And even if the food god changes his mind and chooses to coexist peacefully with us, a new third director will eventually emerge, even another food god. Who can guarantee they will continue to keep their promise? That's not the case. The first dead one couldn't help but frown upon hearing this. The cleaning bureau doesn't need to target the dead realm, and in the past few thousand years, although there have been many directors and executives, they all honored the agreement. The ones to break it first were you. The so-called worry about humans breaking their promises is nothing more than an excuse to rid yourselves of the dead and interfere in the mortal world again. Whatever you say, I won't agree to you using my body. First dead one, my lord. Speaking up after a long silence, the faceless man once again said, "Does your corpse truly belong to you entirely?" "What do you mean by that?" "I mean, at the time, your corpse did belong to you, but it has been soaking in the purest death of the dead realm for countless years, marked by our presence. Can it not be considered a property jointly owned by the entire dead realm?" "You, first dead one, my lord." Under the angry and disappointed gaze of the clay man, the faceless man raised his head to meet his eyes, expressionless as he spoke. "The property of the entire dead realm should be used to protect the whole of the dead realm. So please do refrain from unnecessary actions. Lastly, though I sincerely respect you, should you choose to side with the humans and the cleaning bureau, refusing to hand over your corpse, then we can only apologize. You all?" Looking at the overlords of the dead realm who stood behind the faceless man, some with apologetic faces, others with vicious eyes, the first dead couldn't help but raise an angry eyebrow and then, full of disappointment, shouted, "Have you forgotten what you once said? When I opened the no-return path and distributed my power, each and every one of you promised me that you would maintain the normal operation of the dead realm. This is a shameful betrayal. We are now maintaining the normal operation of the dead realm." The faceless man straightened up slightly, then coldly asked back, "Lord First Dead, is it possible that the one who has truly betrayed the dead realm is you?" "I betrayed the dead realm? What madness are you talking about?" "My lord, what I am saying is not madness, but the truth." After correcting the first dead's words, the faceless man slowly straightened his spine. With a look of slight disdain, he said, "Indeed, we came from the living world, but we have long since died. The us of now are deceased souls, standing at the pinnacle of the entire dead realm as its rulers. Without us, who knows how many years ago the living world would have perished. And having sacrificed so much for humans and the living world, we seek the respect and status we deserve and wish for the right to return to the living world. Isn't that fair? What wrong have we done? And you, even though you were the first deceased in the dead realm, you never considered yourself part of it. Despite having the capability, you never once fought for our chance to return to the living world. In your eyes, we aren't the rulers of the dead realm, but mere assistants to help you deal with the souls of the dead. We are just a few slaves who must remain in this boring world of black, white, and gray, eternally serving humans and the living world. I, seemingly startled by the faceless man's sudden outburst of anger, the previously outraged first dead involuntarily took a half-step back, then took a deep breath and said, with a hint of guilt, "I never thought of it that way, nor did I ever see you as slaves. I just believed that since we are already dead, we should not return to the world of the living. Moreover, over these many years, you have become too deeply entangled with the dead realm for ordinary people to possibly withstand. If you were to rashly return to the living world, it would surely bring about widespread death. So sacrifice is the only choice. Why must we be the ones to sacrifice?" With corpse wraps entwined around his body slightly discoloring, squeezing out blood mixed with turbid yellow pus, the grim-eyed master of the dead spoke. The living beings still alive in the world will eventually come here, so why can't we go back? We also came from the living world, and we have sacrificed so much to maintain its stability. The ones who should step back are not us. But you are already dead. Seemingly not good at handling such situations, as the overlords of the dead realm looked at him with those eyes that seemed to be burning. The first dead involuntarily took another step back, then weakly argued. The dead enter the dead realm, and after they perish, they return to their origin, allowing new souls to manifest in the living world. This is a part of the world's rules. Compared to other souls, you have gained a lot. Besides not supporting your return to the living world, I have granted you eternal life and never restricted you otherwise. Why can't you be satisfied? We are not unsatisfied, but we want to receive equivalent rewards for our contributions. Never mind, you should just leave. After shaking his head slightly, seemingly weary of continuing to explain, the faceless man raised his arm, gesturing towards a direction away from the frozen river, and emotionlessly said, "Though you are the strongest overlord of the dead realm, after you opened the no-return path and distributed the rules of the dead realm, my power, and that of the engraver and the mountain patrol woman, isn't much weaker than yours anymore. Given a 3-on-1 situation, you wouldn't be able to win, especially with the others backing us. For the sake of your previous care for us, please leave here. I will not say this a second time." Seeing all the overlords of the dead realm, save for the lamp elder who appeared hesitant, standing firmly behind the faceless man, the clay figure that the first dead transformed into couldn't help but have his eyes dim slightly, and then he sighed, saying, "I can leave. Additionally, I may not be sure whether what I did in the past was right or wrong, but one thing I am certain of is that you are definitely in the wrong." Are we in the wrong? Watching the first dead leave in despondence after leaving behind a word, the faceless man fell into brief silence, then called out, "Lord First Dead." Upon hearing the call from behind, the first dead, who had soil peeling off his body, turned around in surprise, but what immediately caught his eye wasn't the faceless man's featureless face, but a phosphorescent, eerie blue lantern flame.
I'm sorry.
Accompanied by the faceless man's apology, black and white bricks spread out from under his feet, replacing the pale ground by the frozen riverbank with a bizarre plaza intertwined in black and white. Meanwhile, a gigantic tombstone covered in thick green moss emerged from the ground behind the first dead, with the shadow of the pale blue lantern flame seemingly etched along its edges, engraved on the tombstone's surface like with a chisel. Finally, the lantern in the lamp elder's hand gently swayed, and the blue flame that had overtaken the first dead's eyes trickled down from his eye sockets, swiftly flowing over his entire body, turning the bewildered him into a human-shaped azure blue torch. "Send him off." With a somewhat deep tone from the faceless man, the lamp elder sighed softly and then lifted his other hand, missing its palm, using the cut-off half of the wrist, to slash through the empty air beneath the first dead's feet. Crack! With a sudden, strange tearing sound, the black and white bricks, the bluish lantern flame, and the moss-covered gigantic tombstone vanished before the eyes of the overlords of the dead realm, replaced by an ancient and familiar broken cliff. Sorry. Gazing into the perplexed eyes of the first dead, the lamp elder temporarily in charge of the cliff of the end side, then stepped forward with his head down and pushed the motionless first dead off the edge of the cliff. "You did not choose to stand with the dead realm, and the plan to ambush the Purging Bureau must not be leaked, so sorry for this. Let's go." After looking at the first dead, who stiffly fell from the cliff of doomsday like a stone, the faceless man couldn't help but sigh, then turned to the astonished overlords of the dead realm and said, "I didn't wish for this either, but the Lord First Dead knew too much if he—" "Wait!" Staring at a pile of shattered ice in the distance, as well as the black glacier already gouged with a large hole, the faceless man's eyes suddenly widened, almost tearing through his own face. "Where is the mountain patrol woman? Where is the mountain patrol woman?" Damn, what a quick reaction. Hearing the furious shout from outside the ice layer, I couldn't help but curse inwardly. I didn't continue hiding but instead pushed my mount to full throttle, digging fiercely at the glacier in front of me. When the mountain patrol girl first consumed the blood of the dead, Leon was delighted to discover that perhaps due to nearly dying causing a delay in thought, her defense of her heart lake suddenly weakened significantly. But after discovering this huge loophole, Leon didn't immediately invade her heart lake. Instead, he adjusted his erosion intensity while continuously taunting her, provoking her to consume more blood of the dead, further weakening her resistance. When the patrol girl shut off her senses, and the first dead emerged, drawing all attention, Leon temporarily escaped from her heart lake, picked up the blood of the dead thrown on the ground by the faceless man, and forcefully fed it to her. The last straw that broke the camel's back, the mountain patrol girl, already reaching her limit, lost consciousness without a sound, and her entire heart lake was completely occupied by Leon. Seizing the opportunity during the overlords of the Dead Realm's internal strife, Leon, now with control over the patrol woman's unconscious body, quietly slipped into the frozen river. Who the heck has time to listen to your debates?
I'm just gonna die.
Stop him. Quickly stop him. Hearing the sound of ice breaking within the frozen river, even the slowest person would realize what was happening. Amidst the faceless man's furious roar, the overlords of the Dead Realm rushed into the chasm, desperately chasing deeper. However, just a few pieces of broken ice were enough to freeze an injured Lord of Death, so the density of death in the entire frozen river was self-evident. The overlords of the Dead Realm had just entered the hole dug by Leon, and before they managed to go far, they were covered in thick white frost, their movements hindered by the dense death rules. Leon, although able to rely on the resistance given by the materialism badge to push against the death rules, found the death ice walls of the frozen river unusually tough. The patrol girl's nails were digging to the point of breaking, yet he could only inch forward slowly. With each facing their own troubles, Leon and the pursuing overlords of the Dead Realm engaged in a painfully slow race against death, advancing at a tortoise's pace through the ice walls. However, the race didn't last long. As they gradually delved deeper into the frozen river, the icy breath of death intensified again, reducing the overlord's speed to that of a turtle. While Leon's speed was also affected, thanks to the supermodel resistance provided by materialism, he continued pushing against the cold, already glimpsing the ancient coffin frozen in the ice layer, just a step away from digging it out. This is a sure win. Seeing the bluish-black coffin so close, Leon couldn't help but beam with genuine joy. Knowing that the manpower deployed by the cleanup bureau, along with his own trump cards, was enough to bulldoze through the realm of the dead, this coffin's corpse remained the last unstable factor. Considering the overlords of the Dead Realm plotting against the cleanup bureau wouldn't all enter the sage's cemetery, and if the cleanup bureau were to pursue, they'd certainly suffer heavy losses if frozen on the spot. Hence, he had to destroy it as much as possible. As for the method, let me touch it. Just a guarantee is enough. Controlling the patrol woman to scrape out the coffin, then uncovering a corner with effort, Leon immediately switched out the arcane inheritor, Taurus, reaching into the pitch-black coffin. I can't forge the incredible supernatural artifacts, but one lousy artifact forged becomes garbage clogging the toilet. No matter if it's the corpse of the divine pillar or the source of death, let me touch it, and a little forge with Taurus's secret technique will guarantee it becomes super trash that even clogs the toilet. No! Seeing the smile on Leon's face as he reached out, the faceless man, struggling from behind, couldn't help but shiver, sensing an uncanny chill colder than death. The lamp! Use your lamp! Hearing the faceless man's words, the old man with the lamp hesitated for a moment, then said cautiously, "It's too close. It's very dangerous, and a slight mistake could also take the coffin down with it. Besides, the corpse of the first dead is very sturdy. He could only destroy a small part at most. We can totally afford to wait." "No, we can't wait." Watching Leon emerge from the patrol woman's heart, with half his body entering the coffin, an alarm bell ringing in his heart, the faceless man howled. "Listen to me. Act now, or it'll be too late." "All right then." Hearing the faceless man's near-hysterical scream, although the old man with the lamp felt it unnecessary, he chose to trust him, carefully opening his lamp, dipping his incomplete right hand in some lamp oil and drawing in the air at Leon's feet. Crunch! The sound of tearing that had just sent away the first dead echoed once more. The solid ice layer beneath Leon's feet vanished halfway, replaced by a sheer cliff like one carved by knives and axes. The moment the cliff of the end, the edge of the dead realm, appeared, Leon's feet were just stepping out beyond the cliff, as if sucked by an enormous gravitational force, tumbling him and the first dead's coffin, on the brink of falling off the cliff of the end together. And at that moment, the artisan, the faceless man, the concealing master, the death workshop lord, Grandma Crow-Eye, and the digging river yellow worm, a total of 6 overlords of the dead realm, simultaneously let out a roar, temporarily freeing themselves from the deathly pressure, rushing towards the cliff of the end. In Leon's astonished gaze, the 10 arms from the 6 lords of the dead realm, and a tail of yellow mud-stained earthworm, as if from the same body, executed an impeccably perfect maneuver. 8 arms, alongside the tail of digging river yellow worm, grabbed handles, wrapped the coffin, and held onto the first dead's coffin tightly, forcibly pulling the heavy coffin back from the clutches of the cliff of the end. Meanwhile, the 2 fingerprint-less hands of the faceless man did not hesitate, directly reaching for Leon, firmly pressing against his chest. Phew! Just in time. Glancing at the coffin dragged back by the others, the faceless man couldn't help but let out a long breath, revealing a peculiar mouthless and eyeless smile at Leon. Then, with a sudden force of his arms, he shoved the dumbstruck Leon towards the bottomless precipice. Goodbye, Leon! Emma's tightly shut eyes suddenly opened, after taking several deep breaths. She shivered all over, unable to resist raising her arm to laboriously push away the dirty ebony lid above her head. She sat up from the worm-eaten coffin, her back drenched in cold sweat. What was going on? Why, in her nightmare, was Leon pushed off a cliff by a beast with an indistinct face? Seemingly hearing the sound of a coffin lid being opened behind him, the square-headed old man, who was scrubbing pots not far away, couldn't help but glance back. Then, with a face full of displeasure, he said, "You've already entered the coffin. Why are you sitting up again? Have you forgotten what I told you before?"
I'm sorry.
After calming her pounding heart a little, a frightened Emma hurriedly apologized. "Master, I just had a nightmare." "Stop. Cease immediately." Raising his hand in a stop gesture, the old man interrupted Emma, saying with a face full of annoyance, "All of you were tormented over in the city of regret, and now you've entered the wise man's coffin that affects the soul. It would be strange not to have 17 or 18 nightmares. Look at them, aren't they dreaming as well?" As if to prove his point, the old man waved towards the chaotic, pit-filled graveyard. Old coffin lids sprung open in response, revealing the murmuring cleaners beneath. "Boo-hoo! I was wrong. I was really wrong. Please let him go, please. This marriage can't end. Or we can be together, all 3 of us."
No.
"No. How could this happen? See? Aren't they dreaming too?" Pointing at the coffin under Emma with his hand, the old man said, "Hurry and lie back down. All you little weaklings can't even beat the true God. You've stayed in the city of regret for several weeks now. Your souls are beyond spent. After returning to the present world, you'll need at least a year or so just to be able to walk, and it's certainly going to take 3 to 5 years to fully recover. And although having nightmares in the wise man's coffin is unpleasant, it's also repairing the cracks in your souls, even offering a tiny bit of wisdom enhancement. You're making a big gain, understand?" "Thank you, sir." Having already heard about the old man in charge from the red-haired director's discussions, Emma didn't dare slack off in front of the host who had taken them in. She quickly expressed her thanks, then hesitated. "But the nightmare I just had seemed a bit off." "There's no such thing as off or not off. What's unusual about a dream? There's no need to make a big fuss." "But." "No buts. Go, go, go. Hurry back to lie down. Don't make trouble for me." Taking a scrub brush with a wooden handle as bright as a mirror from a pot, he pointed to a group of deceased beings tied to a tree, saying impatiently, See that green-haired old man? His hair was blonde before it turned moldy. He was once a once-in-a-millennium great playwright. Every hair he lost while writing scripts was collected by people as real gold. And that old lady across from us, though her chest now sags to her knees, she was once a dancer known for elegance, drawing crowds of at least 10,000 for a single performance. People eager to meet her could line up over a kilometer. The rest, bundled over there in heaps, are mostly scholars from Kralik, City of Machinery. Many of the things you use now were invented by them. Each one taken individually is a hero of humanity. And to free up coffins to repair your souls, I dug them all out from burial mounds. If not for that boy delivering you, I'd have no interest in whether your soul had issues or not. Don't take it for granted. But I just dreamed of Leon. Aren't you his lover? What's unusual about dreaming of him? Choked by the old man's matter-of-fact question, Emma's face turned slightly red after holding it in a moment, and she said, "Not that kind of dream. I dreamed of Leon hugging a naked man, and they fell off a very steep cliff together." Ah? After hearing Emma's words, the old man was instantly shocked, incredulity spreading across his face as he said, "He has that kind of interest?"
No.
Realizing the old man's thinking was a little off and feeling unable to explain herself, Emma licked her lips, trying hard to organize her thoughts before explaining again. "Leon and I have a very close connection. Listen to me." Raising her hand in advance to halt the old man from speaking, Emma, with a somewhat anxious expression, quickly explained, "Leon once carried me back from the realm of the dead to the present world. Our souls are very close, and since then, there's been a faint connection between us. So I think my nightmare wasn't just a simple nightmare, but rather Leon's soul fragment that remained in the realm of the dead might have encountered an issue, and as a result, my soul felt the situation." "I see." Upon hearing this, the old man's face turned grave, his brows tightly furrowed as he said, "So according to your analysis, did that boy's soul and a naked man embrace and jump off a cliff together?" This old man must be out of his mind. Faced with the old director's constantly off-topic pretentiousness, Emma, profoundly uneasy, couldn't help but stomp her foot, saying with a slightly irritated expression, "Master, Leon might be in trouble. He's our bureau's most outstanding cleaner these past years. Plus, you're his teacher. That's nonsense." The square-headed old man couldn't suppress his rage, hopping and yelling in response. "You are his teacher. Your whole family is his teacher. Damn, don't spout nonsense. I've never taught him anything. I'm not even familiar with him. Teacher, what you're saying is a bit guilty." Oh. Upon hearing the voice that nearly drove him to ruin, the old director couldn't help but shrink his neck slightly, his expression becoming tremendously complex as he looked back. A heap of rare materials. No, a familiar black-haired, black-eyed figure reached out from the pot, flipping the pot edge to pour out the scrub water. Then, crouching, they emerged from the pot polished to a shine, with a face bearing an irritating smile as they spoke. 3. Leon. In the midst of the overwhelming calls, a tall figure suddenly rushed past, causing the old man from the third generation to stagger, and then firmly threw herself into Leon's embrace. When Emma was first rescued from the City of Regret, she had already thought about what to say upon meeting again. But when that familiar figure appeared, her planned response instantly crumbled, leaving only an instinctive embrace. "Leon." With a force almost as if to merge him into her own body, she gave Leon an incredibly firm hug. Leaning on his shoulder with reddened eyes, Emma said in a trembling voice, Thank you. If it weren't for you, it's nothing." Feeling the intense turmoil in Emma's heart lake, Leon couldn't help but extend his hand to gently pat her back, then softly replied, Even if it were me who got into trouble, you would definitely come to save me, too." Before Leon could finish, the old man from the third generation chimed in with a quirky tone, looking up at Leon with a disdainful smirk and said, "Back when my wife was still alive, I said the same thing to her. And then she burst into tears and insisted on marrying me. So many years have passed, and you're still using my old tricks. No, your mouth used to just be annoying. How did it suddenly become even more so? Feeling the atmosphere being maliciously disrupted, Leon could only release his hold on the slightly stiffened Emma and look towards the square-headed old man across from him, his expression a bit speechless. Sir, you seem more spirited than last time. All right, enough with the nonsense. Glancing at Leon's cufflink, the old man from the third generation impatiently exclaimed, Where's the stuff? Quick, quick, quick. Bring out all the materials. I've been waiting so long I'm practically molding. The materials are with Taurus. She'll be here soon. I just came ahead to. Fine. It doesn't matter why you're here. Go chat with your lover over there and don't keep me waiting. Waving dismissively, the old man from the third generation dragged over a tombstone to use as a stool and sat beside his big cauldron, scratching and staring intently at it, completely ignoring the two of them. This old director, who only follows the money, really is just as annoying as before. Faced with the cranky demeanor of the old man from the third generation, Leon clicked his tongue and decided to take Emma further away from the irritating old man. However, even though Leon had already let go of his hold, the arm around his waist remained there, unknowingly tightening a bit more. Emma? Call me Emma. Emma. Even without intentionally trying to peer into Emma's thoughts, her heart lake was so tumultuous and directly, defenselessly, it was presented before Leon's eyes. As a quasi-true god who held power over the heart lake, Leon found it impossible to ignore. If at first, the heart lake was filled with intense joy and gratitude, as their embrace tightened, a deeper change flowed through the waves in the heart lake. What first surfaced was an awareness of one's own inner clarity, followed by a boundless surge of passionate tides. Within this new surge, there was neither tangled worries nor intricate turns, only the stubbornness and fervor of wanting to press forward at all costs. Emma. Choosing not to change how he addressed her as per Emma's request, Leon hesitated for a moment, then lowered his head and said softly, Perhaps you should first calm down. You've just had a close brush with death and suffered quite a shock, so your emotions are very intense. The decisions made at such times are usually not rational. Really? Emma blinked upon hearing this. What decision have I made? So you've already felt it. You know what I'm thinking, right? The arm around Leon's waist slightly loosened, leaving a small gap between them, and Emma leaned back slightly, looking into Leon's evasive eyes, no longer as gentle as before, steadily saying, My emotions are intense, but it does not mean I'm not rational. Leon, don't you have the power to perceive the heart lake? Why don't you feel my heart directly? Pulling Leon's hand, she placed it firmly on her chest, her ears turning red, and earnestly asked, Leon, tell me, how is my heart now? Tell me, have I lost my judgment due to excitement, mistaking my gratitude for you as something else? Or has a life-threatening experience finally made me realize what I truly want? I may not see your heart lake, but I can see your eyes. Gazing at Leon, who slightly turned his head to avoid her gaze, Emma stubbornly continued, Leon, you can see your own heart lake. Tell me how it looks now. Such things, human emotions are very complex, so what I say may not necessarily be right. That's not important. Emma slightly lifted her head, her gentle eyes fixed stubbornly on Leon, and said, As long as you say it, I will believe it. But this isn't a matter of belief or disbelief. Leon sighed slightly, his lips moving a bit. Then he raised his left hand in front of Emma's eyes, turned his head away and said, Emma, I'm already married. I understand. Looking at the dazzlingly bright ring on Leon's hand, under the influence of the status of married person, Emma's turbulent heart lake halted for a moment, then withdrew like a receding tide. Seeing Leon intentionally avoid meeting her eyes, yet resolutely raising the hand wearing the ring to create a barrier between them, Emma couldn't help but clamp her lips tightly, feeling as if her heart was suddenly gouged out. As the icy feeling flooded her heart, Emma's heartbeat, which had been pounding like drums, suddenly paused, sinking into a brief silence, followed by boom. A tempest filled with chilling intent erupted from her chest, carefully bypassing Leon, before swiftly spreading around, directly knocking down the eavesdropping old man from the third generation. Soon, the grayish-brown soil of the sage's cemetery quickly turned pale in the cold. The originally slightly green plants also turned gray, and an immense, cold stillness violently flowed outwards, coating the surrounding tombstones in a thin layer of white frost in just a few breaths. Death powers. Propping himself up by a nearby tombstone, seeing Emma standing across from Leon with her head slightly lowered and icicles forming at the corners of her eyes, the old man from the third generation could only stare blankly at Leon, quite literally sucking in a chilly breath. She was just trying to talk about love with you. How did she end up becoming the goddess of death? At this moment, Leon had no mind to listen to the murmurs of the third generation old man. Feeling the aura emitted by Emma, that deathly and cold, yet inexplicably familiar aura, Leon was stunned. And upon noticing her own changes, Emma's expression also showed a hint of confusion. She then subconsciously raised her head and cast a slightly helpless glance at Leon. What is this? This is a good thing. A very good thing. Before Leon could answer, the third generation old man spoke first, giving a thumbs up and marveling. Although your choice in men is a bit poor, your talent in death powers is truly high, and your understanding of death is clearly different from ordinary people. Let me see. Reaching into his bosom, he rummaged a couple of times and took out a dirty pair of reading glasses. After putting them on, the third-generation director scratched the back of his slightly balding head and said without surprise, "This child has a bloodline tied to death, naturally possessing several shards of death power. If you count upwards in your ancestry, there should have been at least 8 or 9 grand shaman-level mediums, and they have all passed down the power fragments to you." Grand shaman-level mediums? They are the kind of human mediums who, by practicing the Grand Court secret technique for many years, have slightly comprehended the corresponding powers. Glancing back at Leon, who wore a surprised look, the third-generation old man explained. Although those grand mediums are severely lacking in power, usually only at the level of 20 or 30 Leon value, due to their lifelong practice of the Grand Court secret technique, their understanding of power is not bad, and they can essentially cross the threshold of a true god. And those who have touched the true god threshold in terms of power are like the situation with the 13 royal family. They can pass down a portion of the power fragments they possess to their descendants through their bloodline. Having explained the issue with the bloodline, the third-generation old man turned around to take another look at Emma, then nodded with a knowing expression and said, "Besides being extraordinarily gifted, your postnatal experiences are also, basically accompanied by death at every step, unable to escape for even a moment. Not only were you noticed early on by the overlords of the dead realm, fostering a child who can naturally transcend life and death, but you've also witnessed and personally experienced a lot of death, and even the anomalies you've awakened are related to death, often going back and forth between life and death. With so many experiences accumulating, you really ought to have some insights." Third-generation Lord. Fearing that what the third-generation old man said next might touch upon Emma's overly painful past experiences, Leon hurriedly spoke. "Is it dangerous for Emma to be like this now? What danger could she be in?" Upon hearing this, the third-generation old man sneered and said, "Don't worry, as I said before, this is a good thing. We humans can basically not surpass death. Even strong ones like me have to die and generally only experience death personally once in a lifetime. So, very few can comprehend death powers. Those mediums only grasp fragments of death. But since the concept of death power is itself largely encompassing, even grasping only 10 or 20% of it is enough to support a true god-level overlord of the dead realm. As for her current situation, it's akin to a living overlord of the dead realm. Given her demonstrated potential, when the day comes that she dies, if you can manage to take down an overlord of the dead realm and make room, she can basically take that position directly. Emma becoming an overlord of the dead realm? Exchanging a glance with Emma, whose expression was complex, Leon was about to say something when a sharp, screeching sound of metal deformation suddenly came from the location of the iron pot behind him. Oh no! My pot! Seeing the men and women tumble out of the overturned pot like dumped dumplings, the third-generation director couldn't help but stomp his foot in distress and hurriedly ran back, crying in a distressed manner. Why squeeze, why squeeze? Can't you come out one by one? My pot is deformed now. Sorry, third-generation lord. Tidying up his somewhat messy outer robe, while spots of yellow mud clung to his temples, the embarrassed Archer director explained. Though Leon has already taken control of the gate of the deceased, the realm of the dead is ultimately the Overlord's territory. Bringing so many people in without alerting them is really not easy. We could only follow the mirror world path Leon opened, sneaking. All right, how you got in has nothing to do with me. Somewhat roughly interrupting Archer director's explanation, the third-generation old man looked at the Taurus director, who was letting himself up against a tombstone, and eagerly said, "Where's the stuff? Hurry up. Let me take a look. Your skills aren't up to par. Don't ruin my materials." I knew it would be this line. Upon hearing the unceremonious evaluation from the third-generation old man, the always gentle Taurus director rolled his eyes before tossing a small bag embroidered with lotus leaves over and patiently reminded, "Third-generation lord, I have already done all the initial processing. There's nothing else to note about the other materials, except for that pillar god. Compared to other true gods, its resonance is more special. No matter how it's suppressed, it cannot match with the other materials, so it's either made the foundation or the trim, requiring individual handling. If you can figure this out, wouldn't I know it too?" "All right, no need for this kind of drivel. Leave the rest to me." Untying the cord of the small bag and taking a glance at the 40 neatly arranged true god corpses inside, the third-generation old man grinned so widely that even his gums showed, elatedly saying, "The material handling isn't too bad. I'll get started, and everyone else can just watch from the side. Except you." At this point, the third-generation old man seemed to remember something, quickly tightening the cord and stashing the bag back into his coat, then turned his head to look at Leon behind him, pointing cautiously into the distance. "Stand way back. Best to stand behind a tree. Absolutely no getting close to my pot." Seeing the third-generation old man's expression like guarding against a thief, Leon couldn't help but twitch his mouth. "Old director, those dozens of true gods are still provided by me, and this is how you treat me. Shoo shoo. Go quickly." Seeing Leon remain standing as if reluctant to move, the third-generation old man stepped half a step back, apparently afraid of getting contaminated by something dirty, and nervously urged again, "That secret technique of yours. Anyway, you make me uneasy when you're nearby. My forging secret technique demands full concentration, and your being too close might affect my performance. SK. Blame the road when the shoes aren't good." Faced with repeated expulsion by the third-generation director, Leon rolled his eyes speechlessly, then turned around under the apologetic gaze of the Taurus director, meeting Emma's resentful eyes. "Damn. The problem here hasn't been solved yet. Leon." Seeing Leon's somewhat stiff expression, the tall and beautiful woman's eyes dimmed slightly, and she subconsciously turned her head away, speaking in a low, dejected voice. "Don't worry. I won't make things difficult for you. I just wanted to ask you one more thing. If I hadn't gone out on a mission back then but stayed in the capital instead, would our outcome have been different?" Feeling the heart lake of Emma filled with loss and pain, Leon, guilt-ridden, initially wanted to firmly reject, but no matter what, he couldn't open his mouth, so he too turned his head away, speaking ambiguously. "Emma, Senior, these maybe scenarios can't change the reality of what happened. I admit I did have feelings for you back then." Halfway through his sentence, Leon seemed to remember something, insight flashed, and he glanced back over his shoulder, indeed seeing over a dozen pairs of keen eyes. "What are you standing around for? Put my pot up there. Quick! Start digging up the graves. Look for the big ones first. Hurry! Invite out the sages inside. Then we'll lie in. Damn! These slackers. Seeing the group suddenly spring into action like wind-up toys, Leon couldn't help but close his eyes and tilt his head back, transforming into a visage like a subway elder, his face overflowing with disdain. I'm really fed up. We're about to go to war with the realm of the dead, and you still have time to dig into my affairs? His mouth twitched involuntarily, and Leon decisively pulled Emma a bit farther away, under the tree the third-generation director had pointed out earlier, then gently wrapped Emma's arm, speaking softly with guilt. I'm sorry, Emma Sr. I can't. No, you don't have to say sorry, covering Leon's lips with her hand, as proven by countless melodramatic dramas. Emma slightly shook her head facing Leon's proactive apology, then said bleakly, You have nothing to be sorry about. Instead, you saved me again and again. Maybe I'm just being ungrateful. Sorry, Leon, maybe my soul hasn't fully healed. I want to go back and lie down for a while. Is that all right? All right. After rubbing the ring on his hand, Leon eventually steeled himself, nodding, and made no attempt to make her stay, instead silently watching Emma walk away. When she moved out of sight, he couldn't help but let out a soft sigh. Emma really hasn't done anything wrong, but neither has Veronica. If he casually makes any promise just out of reluctance, it would hurt everyone in one go, so sizzle. Hearing the familiar harsh noise in his ear, Leon couldn't help but smile wryly, knowing that his choice must have triggered some sort of badge again, likely with a rather unpleasant name, perhaps Cold-Hearted Man or... During your fall from the cliff of the end, you hit the first deceased who was pushed off the cliff, absorbing part of its death powers under the promise of revenge. Current number of Netherworld True Gods devoured: 3, namely, Death's Guardian Dog, Wailing Puppet, and First Deceased. Remaining number of undevoured Netherworld True Gods: 12, specifically Grandma Crow-Eye, Faceless Man, Excavator Huang Worm, Concealing Master, Dead Workshop Master, Lantern Bearer. Once all Netherworld True Gods are devoured, your hidden gold-level badge, Food God Ghoul, will advance to the concealed variant badge, I Am the End of Death. Current progress is March 15th. What on earth is this situation? In the moment Leon was dumbfounded, an indescribable immense emptiness suddenly surged from deep within his soul, as if something called self had a corner cut off, then thoroughly ground in a cold machine. That unbearably terrifying sense of loss caused Leon to dizzy spell, almost sending him to the ground if not for catching the nearby tree trunk. This is my part of the soul crushed by the cliff of the end? Although he did not obtain the memories of that part of the soul, the icy aura transmitted from the break of the soul, sharing the same root yet far stronger than Emma's power, Leon immediately understood the fate of his soul fragment. Missing part of the soul is not unacceptable. When deciding to divide his soul into the netherworld, Leon was already prepared to permanently lose that part. But what about the first deceased? How did it get pushed off the cliff of the end? Director Taurus. Having received this shocking news, Leon hurriedly staggered towards the cauldron filled with steaming water, ignoring the discomfort from his missing soul part, and he faced the puzzled gazes of the crowd, pale-faced as he revealed. The portion of my soul that entered the netherworld has fallen off the cliff of the end with the first deceased and is most likely already shattered, returned to the world origin. Faced with this startling news, the group of cleaners stood frozen in place, then descended into a deathly silence. After a while, the spoon in the third-generation elder's hand dropped with a thud into the cooking pot, and the sudden sound broke the silence, causing the group of cleaners to erupt in an uproar. You even took down the first deceased? That's the oldest ruler of the netherworld. You took it down with just a quarter of your soul. No, it was neutral. You killed a neutral party too. We're doomed. Without the first deceased, what about the no-return path? Damn it, my spoon. Silence. The Taurus director, finally regaining composure, shouted to quiet the chattering cleaners, Then, with gritted teeth, turned to Leon and asked, "Leon, you tell us, what exactly is going on?" "The first deceased wasn't killed by me, the specific process isn't clear, but the first deceased was pushed off the cliff of the end, and there's no doubt it's gone now." Hiding the details about the badge, Leon briefly shared the intelligence he received from his soul fragment. "From the information I gathered, it looks like the first deceased was betrayed. Maybe a civil war broke out among the Netherworld overlords? The overlords of the Dead Realm fell into conflict?" After hearing Leon's speculations, everyone couldn't help but exchange glances. "Then, that's unlikely, right?" Capricorn, the director, was the first to speak, blinking with a mix of doubt. "Even though they're all called the overlords of the Dead Realm, the first deceased is different from the others. Even among the Pillar Gods, he's one of the most powerful. At his peak, he could even rival the supreme four Pillar Gods of the past. Even though later on, due to limited capabilities, he felt he couldn't manage all the deceased properly, so he voluntarily relinquished over half of his death authority. He is still the strongest overlord of the Dead Realm. How could he just be gone like that? I also think it's somewhat strange." After pondering for a moment, the corpulent Director Cancer frowned and said, "Although the first deceased was neutral and didn't exert much restraint on others, it's true he's the leader of the overlords of the Dead Realm given his seniority. According to records, in the past, he once fought with the Third Lord to protect the six-faced elephant deer, which wanted to leave the Dead Realm and return to the living world. His prestige among the overlords should be very high. How could he be taken out because of internal conflict? Maybe it's some sort of conspiracy." Director Sagittarius squinted his eyes, full of suspicion, and said, "The overlords of the Dead Realm might have some scheme underway, planning to use pieces of Aquarius's soul to pass false messages to us." "Oh, the Third Lord." At this point, Director Sagittarius seemed to remember something, turned and looked at the elderly Third Lord, asking with a furrowed brow, "You've dealt with the first deceased more times than I have. What do you think of this news?" "I don't give a damn." Reaching into the pot and failing to find even a ladle handle, the irritated Third Lord stomped and shouted loudly towards Leon. "I told you not to come over. Damn it. I even put the god of forging into the pot to soak. What's the idea of throwing a ladle in there? Isn't it a millennium-old Parkinson's patient with trembling hands, dropping the ladle into the pot, and you blame it on me?" Seeing the Third Lord, sweating from anxiety, Leon couldn't help but purse his lips. Then, tired of dealing with this forging fanatic, he casually suggested, "Lord Taurus, we can't just sit here pondering without getting any results. How about I first go out of the Sage's Cemetery and check the situation on the no-return path? You all know my abilities. If there's indeed a problem with the first deceased, the no-return path would surely stall too. Just let me touch the path, and we can determine the authenticity of this news." "That's indeed the most direct method." Nodding in agreement with Leon's suggestion, Director Taurus glanced at Leon's pallid face and the noticeably fragmented soul, then frowned and said, "But let's have someone else go. Your current condition looks bad. The attitude of the overlords of the Dead Realm is still unclear. It might be dangerous for you to go out rashly." "Lord Taurus, I'm fine." "Nonsense. Missing a quarter of your soul. How could you be fine?" Giving Leon a displeased look, the silver-haired old lady adamantly said, "You're wobbling even as you walk? Stop thinking about moving around. Quickly find a coffin to lie in and mend that broken soul. But over at the no-return path, Pisces can go." Director Taurus shook his head and said, "The secret technique of the Pisces Palace is similar to your ability. Checking whether the no-return path has stalled is the same if he goes. You better take care of yourself." "All right then." Seeing the stubborn expression of the silver-haired old lady, Leon understood there was no room for negotiation. He had to accept her concern and gave up the plan of going out to check the situation. Then, he found a newly opened coffin, intending to lie down to repair his soul. However, get a different coffin. After fishing the god of forging out from the pot, looking at the iron ladle stuck in his forehead. The shaken third director glared at Leon with anger. You startled me. You ruined the quality of the materials. Find a coffin away from me. Don't disturb my forging. You really have so many issues. Unable to suppress a roll of the eyes at the third lord. Since those who can forge are the masters, Leon had to replace the coffin lid back, under the baffled gaze of the resurrected dead inside the coffin, and find a further one. Further. Even further. Damn it, you're not done yet? Looking at the third lord, who was still shouting further, even though their straight-line distance was over 800 meters, Leon couldn't help but close his eyes. Deciding to publicly announce the master-disciple relationship once back, he swallowed his temper and walked a dozen more meters away. There, that'll do. The one that's dug open. All right, whatever you say. Finally getting the nod from the third lord, Leon with a scowl walked to a dug-up grave mound, kicked away the worm-eaten ebony coffin lid, and then met eyes with Emma, who was staring up in surprise. Ha! Seeing Emma sitting with knees together in the ebony coffin, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes and staring back in panic, Leon was momentarily stunned. Then suddenly a force on his backside pushed him down into the warm and soft embrace. Haha! Let's see how you climb out this time. With a clang, the coffin lid was slammed shut. 2 tombstones were placed firmly on top, and then the third lord, who had quietly crept behind Leon, nodded in satisfaction before walking away, commanding at the astonished director Taurus. What are you standing there for? Help me. Aren't you seeing it's time for the pot? Third lord. Seeing the ebony coffin in the distance, which bumped twice but then no longer moved, Director Taurus couldn't help but touch his forehead with his hand, speaking helplessly. What was that just now? I was removing the source of contamination, just like cleaning the pot before forging. Besides, he'll thank me once he's out. Waving off concerns and recalling the sound of 2 intense heartbeats just now, the third lord couldn't help but grin, revealing a benevolent smile unique to scholars of great knowledge. Ah, to be young, don't you agree? Indeed. Huh? After glancing at the only remaining structure on the no-return path, the sage's cemetery, the faceless man seemed to catch a scent, and the skin approximately where his nose would be wrinkled slightly. Strange. How did such a peculiar sour stink suddenly emerge from the sage's cemetery? Did the undead buried inside come out? Seemingly sensing the same strange odor, the lantern holder pinched his nose and said, after the first deceased fell off the cliff of the end, the no-return path, without guidance, is near a halt. All existing rules in the realm of the dead will gradually become chaotic. Naturally, the sage's cemetery cannot escape this fate, and a large number of the undead will slowly lose control. And the souls of those so-called human sages, buried too deep and for too long in the hidden cemetery, become rigid and decayed in thought over time, thus emitting this sour and rotten smell. Is that so? Though the smell still seemed off, the lantern holder's explanation made sense. The faceless man pondered and decided not to probe further but gazed at the silent, gray-white cemetery in the distance, asking in a steady tone, how are the others preparing? Has the first deceased's remains been handled properly? Everything is ready. The antique lantern shook slightly as the lantern holder responded. Apart from the female ranger recovering from Heart Lake's injury, everyone else has been given parts of the first deceased's remains and has hidden around the sage's cemetery, just waiting for the clearing bureau's arrival. That's good. Nodding slightly and showing satisfaction with the other's progress, the faceless man pondered before his brow furrowed with some apprehension and advised, remember to take the ranger further away. Keep her away from the sage's cemetery. It's enough to intercept any escaping members. Also, at this, the faceless man paused slightly, then said coldly, keep an eye on her situation. If she shows any unusual behavior, stop her immediately. If you can't, take her out if necessary. This. After hearing the faceless man's instructions, the lantern holder pondered for a moment, then asked with some confusion, are you worried she hasn't shaken off the control yet? Yes. But when the food god tried to touch the first deceased's remains, he voluntarily left her heart lake and was pushed by you off the cliff of the end. There shouldn't be any soul remnants, right? In theory, that's correct. Recalling Leon's enlightened gaze as he tumbled off the cliff of the end, the faceless man couldn't help but rub the back of his hand. The food god had grasped his hand forcefully when pushed, and after clutching the back of his hand, the previously enraged food god seemed to suddenly understand something, staring straight at him with an eerie, all-knowing gaze that now, thinking back, sent shivers down his spine. But since the ranger had been controlled by the food god, we can't be sure he hasn't left any traps inside her. To be safe, we have to monitor her closely. Pulling the sleeve down to cover the spot touched by the food god, the faceless man glanced towards the ranger before speaking with a chilling expression. Even if the Clearing Bureau's strength has waned, we are no match for them in a direct fight, so the ambush plan must be foolproof. We can't afford any slip-ups. All right? After hearing the faceless man's words, the lantern holder sighed lightly, casting a look of pity towards the ranger, readying himself to send another old friend away if necessary. Just then, the faceless man seemed to notice something, squinting towards the direction of the sage's cemetery. Under the gaze that didn't truly exist, a middle-aged woman, bearing deep marks of age but having been beautiful in her youth, quickly emerged from the side gate of the sage's cemetery and began inspecting the stub of the no-return path closely. That must be Pisces from the Clearing Bureau. Though the woman was well disguised, she couldn't evade the overlords of the dead realm's keen sense of souls. Watching her soul split into 4 parts, the lantern holder couldn't help but ask in amazement. Why did she come out of the sage's cemetery? Have the Clearing Bureau members arrived? Unclear. Let's wait and see. Also, observing the distinct souls of Pisces from afar, the corners of the faceless man's mouth curled slightly, and he elaborated. Later, tell the artisan that once the Clearing Bureau completely steps into the ambush, Pisces from the Clearing Bureau will be his responsibility. The artisan? To be precise, the rules of the Oblivion Namesea controlled by the artisan. The faceless man explained. Each of Pisces from the Clearing Bureau's 4 souls has a name, perfectly countered by the artisan. A single shout could plunge her souls into chaos, even tearing them apart into 4. Now I get it. Nodding in understanding, the lantern holder noted the faceless man's instructions, continuing to observe Pisces with a frown. She seems to be inspecting the no-return path. Could it be the Clearing Bureau has discovered first deceased's condition? Seems so. Watching Pisces return hurriedly to the sage's cemetery after inspecting the path, the faceless man pondered for a moment before stepping out of the shadows. Let's go. We head over. What? Startled by the faceless man's words, the lantern holder quickly reached out to tug him back. Are you crazy? What if there's an ambush by the Clearing Bureau? An ambush would be best. The faceless man chuckled confidently at this, explaining, if there's really a Clearing Bureau ambush, it's intended to capture us all at once. They won't target just 1 or 2 overlords. So the more likely they are to ambush, the safer it is for us to go now. That seems right. Persuaded by the faceless man's reasoning, despite a niggling unease, the lantern holder hesitated for a moment before following quickly. As the 2 overlords approached a certain distance, entering the sage's cemetery's range, the silent thin mist around the cemetery thickened, instantly obscuring everything that was once clear. Soon after, a man and a woman emerged from the mist, standing alertly in front of the faceless man and the lantern holder. What are you 2 doing here? Gazing at the 2 overlords emanating danger, the archer narrowed his eyes, his face stern as he coldly ordered them to leave. It's not the agreed-upon time yet. Please leave. Lord Archer, no need to get agitated. We just saw Lord Pisces and came over for a look. Raising his fingerprintless hands slowly to show no harm intended, the faceless man scrutinized his surroundings, probing. Besides, if it isn't the agreed time yet, why have you already arrived at Sage's cemetery? After looking at the cemetery blocked by dense mist, the faceless man, filled with heightened suspicion, thought for a moment before smiling and continuing. Lord Archer, I suddenly have a strange thought. Could your proposed negotiation actually be an ambush targeting all overlords of the Dead Realm? No. Upon hearing the faceless man's inquiry, both directors felt a collective jolt of tension. The wiser Archer realized it was just a test, and saying more would be wrong, so he merely snorted and held a grim silence. The less experienced Pisces couldn't help but glance at the distant gravestones. Could it be that I guessed correctly? Noticing Pisces' glance, the tense, faceless man raised a brow, following her gaze to sense a faintly hidden ripple of souls. There really is an ambush, signaling the lantern holder behind him to retreat at the first sign of trouble. The faceless man's figure vanished, charging fiercely towards where Pisces had been looking. Wait! Stop! Ignoring the director's startled cries and obstruction, alarm bells ringing in his mind, the faceless man flung away 2 stacked tombstones before kicking open the ebony coffin lid beneath. Seeing the couple inside holding each other in an ambiguous embrace, gazing up at him in bewilderment, the faceless man's facial bones twitched hard beneath his skin, forming an incredibly bizarre expression. Wait, you humans have this big of a heart? Really? Due to the suddenness and awkwardness of the meeting, both the faceless man, who had opened the grave suddenly, and Leon, who was caught off guard, were stunned in place. After several seconds of silence, recovering from their initial shock, both of them recognized each other almost simultaneously. One sprinted towards the outskirts of the cemetery without hesitation, while the other, due to standing up too quickly, fell back down, his soul unstable. Leon! After catching Leon, who had fallen back, Emma, startled, quickly cradled him in her arms, checking his agitated soul, anxiously calling out, "How do you feel? Is there anywhere that feels uncomfortable?" I'm fine. Leon shook his head to indicate he was okay, then tried to lift himself from Emma's soft embrace. Yet, with his incomplete soul and body unable to perfectly synchronize, and having the repair rudely interrupted halfway, he failed several times to get up, instead turning over and lying back down, speaking in a muffled voice. I just got up too quickly. What happened just now? Why did the faceless man suddenly burst in? He probably saw me. Pisces' director, in the form of a middle-aged woman, came over to check Leon's soul, ensuring it was only slightly disordered and not otherwise harmed, slightly relieved, then said with some guilt, although I am also the Pisces director, compared to the true Pisces director, my power still falls short, making it difficult to completely hide my soul. Earlier, when I went out to check the no-return path, he probably noticed me. It's not your fault. After patting the Pisces director's back, the Sagittarius director nearby consoled. Gazing into souls is an instinct of the overlords of the Dead Realm. Without the Sage's Cemetery's masking effect, they could easily find everyone with a glance. Any disguise merely lowering one's presence, making it impossible to completely evade their watch. And if I'm not mistaken, the faceless man was probably outside for a while, eyeing the Sage's Cemetery. In this situation, whether I or Taurus went out, we would still be discovered. Aquarius. Watching Leon wriggle like a large worm in Emma's arms, the Aquarius director frowned slightly, then asked with some confusion, "Why does it seem so hard for you to even sit up? Is the loss of a quarter of your soul affecting you this much?" "It seems a bit more than I expected." Leon couldn't help but smile bitterly upon hearing this, then stopped struggling and explained helplessly, "These coffins in the Sage's Cemetery can repair souls, but the cost is similar to that in the City of Regret, requiring a continuous reliving of one's life's regrets. And I have quite a few regrets, coupled with the significant portion of my soul being missing, leaving me resistant to such disruption. Hence, before the damage is initially patched, my soul state may actually be worse than before." "All right, just lie down for now." Emma gently held Leon's head buried in her embrace, preventing him from moving, her neck slightly flushed as she looked up, pleading slightly as she spoke. "Lord Sagittarius, Leon's current condition is indeed not very well. Can you let him rest a bit longer until his soul stabilizes before participating in the ambush plan? Certainly, let him rest first. Noticing the slightly embarrassed look on Leon's face, Sagittarius Director's usually downturned corners of his mouth lifted slightly in a rare smile, but he quickly became serious again, sighing somewhat helplessly. And judging from the faceless man's actions earlier, he might be suspicious already. Whether this ambush plan will succeed is already uncertain. Despicable Cleaners Association. After fleeing the Sage's cemetery in a panic, just ahead of the faceless man, the Lantern Elder, still somewhat shaken, couldn't help but curse angrily. We agreed to negotiate in 10 days, yet now, only after a few days, not only one director has come, even the food god is here. There must be an ambush in the Sage's cemetery. An ambush? Huh. Turning back to the fog-enveloped Sage's cemetery and finding no one following, the faceless man mused thoughtfully. Not necessarily. Did you clearly see the food god state just now? Huh. The Lantern Elder was slightly taken aback by these words, frowned in recollection, then said somewhat uncertainly. His soul was unstable? Exactly. Nodding slightly, the faceless man gazed back at the tranquil Sage's cemetery, confidently analyzing. Humans differ from us. Losing a quarter of their soul at once would be a fatal injury for most. Only those crossing the boundary between man and God could fare slightly better. And the food god, though he can unleash strength exceeding that of a pillar god under certain conditions, his essence remains human. He doesn't seem to have crossed that threshold. Hearing this, the Lantern Elder seemed to understand, speaking with some excitement. So you mean, he's here to recuperate? Exactly. Recollecting Leon's utterly shocked expression upon seeing him, the faceless man nodded firmly. We knocked a quarter of the food god's soul off the cliff of the end together. He's surely heavily wounded, and the Sage's cemetery happens to have the capability to repair souls. So he should have secretly slipped into the Sage's cemetery, leveraging its rules to mend his damaged soul, while the Sagittarius Director and the Pisces Director are likely here specifically to protect him. Most importantly, at this point, the faceless man paused slightly, then spoke with increasing certainty. Did you see how he appeared with that woman? Embracing like that? How could that be laying an ambush? Now that you mention it, does seem like so? After hearing the faceless man's analysis, the Lantern Elder nodded in agreement, then spoke with some excitement. So, only a few of them are likely inside the Sage's cemetery now? Most likely, yes. Nodding, the faceless man, eyeing the delighted Lantern Elder, spoke with great confidence. If we rush in now, there should only be the near-death Sagittarius Director, a weak female cleaner, the Pisces Director plagued by severe soul-splitting issues, and the food god desperately needing to repair his incomplete soul. Facing such an old, weak, and sick group, victory is assured for us. Are you saying that our plan may have already been discovered by the faceless man? After hearing what the Sagittarius Director said, Taurus Director, who was assisting the third-generation Director, couldn't help but wipe his sweat and then frowned and asked, if they refuse to come in no matter what, then we'll have to fight hard, but with our current situation. Given our current situation, we might just be able to face off against the realm of the dead. Interrupting Taurus Director, the rotund Cancer Director grinned confidently and said, only a quarter of Aquarius's soul descended, thoroughly taking out an overlord of the dead realm, seriously wounding the mountain patroller and the incarnated doe, and even managed to kill the strongest, the first dead. Now, I wasn't the one who killed him. From the coffin carried back by Pisces Director, Leon's sullen protest sounded. The first dead likely died from internal strife and had nothing to do with me. It wasn't me who killed him. All right, then it has nothing to do with you. Not arguing with Leon, the Cancer Director directly nodded and acknowledged his statement, then cheerfully analyzed. In summary, among the overlords of the dead realm who reached the pillar god level, there are only the craftsman, the faceless man, the mountain patroller, and the first dead. The first three can each suppress a director in one-on-one combat, and the strongest, the first dead, can even handle two. Besides the ordinary overlords, there are powerful ones like the incarnated doe and wailing puppet, who hold dominion over multiple places and whose strength is just slightly inferior to the pillar god level. They're a bit weaker than some of us directors one-on-one, but stronger than most Zodiac Bureau chiefs. Now, these most troublesome opponents have already been severely weakened by Aquarius. One pillar god is gone, another seriously injured, and a powerful overlord close to pillar god level is similarly no more. One's seriously injured too. With the current power comparison, even if we each have our problems, confronting the overlords of the dead realm would put us at a disadvantage, but we'd still have more than an 80% chance of winning. But it's not just about the probability of winning. Taurus director sighed in response, looking at the smiling Cancer director with a complex expression. Pisces and I only have soul issues, so at most we'd be seriously injured in a fight. But your and Sagittarius's secret techniques consume lifespan, and you both don't have much time left. If we really go for a head-on fight, you might. It's only a matter of dying a few years earlier. It's not a big issue. The Cancer director patted his belly, smiling warmly. I don't mind. Besides, last time during the 5-palace election, I found a few promising candidates to inherit the secret technique. Though they're not as good as Aquarius, there's no need to worry about the Cancer Palace having no successor. Death isn't anything to be afraid of. What do you say? I have no objections either. Seeing the slightly provocative look from the Cancer director, the Sagittarius director couldn't help but shake his head helplessly, then calmly said, "We'll die, but it's worth it, so we can fight. You guys. Seeing the expressions of two friends who had reached the end of their lives, already prepared, Taurus director's heart felt a bit sour, failing twice to finish speaking. Meanwhile, the third-generation elder, who was tossing divine corpses into a pot, kicked Leon's coffin far away, then took a moment from his busy schedule to give a thumbs-up in evaluation. You two are not bad. Although your abilities aren't great, your courage is decent. The cleaner bureau in your hands may be a mess, but at least it's not entirely rotten. It's just a pity your abilities are somewhat lacking. I might have misunderstood you before. You guys are all right, just lacking capability. Well, our abilities are lacking compared to you and your generation of cleaners, but there was no need to highlight it 3 times in one sentence, right? Faced with the heartfelt compliment from the third-generation elder, several directors couldn't help but feel embarrassed, and Taurus director, about to permanently lose 2 old friends, immediately turned gloomy and couldn't resist angrily saying, "Third-generation master, why do you always say such? I'm just speaking the truth." Interrupting Taurus director, the third-generation elder once again kicked Leon's coffin further away. Amidst the startled cries and curses coming from the coffin, he raised his hand and pointed at his head, explaining with a grinning face, "Because if your abilities were adequate, you would have noticed something was wrong long ago and realized you were surrounded." Were surrounded? Hearing the third-generation elder's words, the directors were momentarily stunned, then looked up in the direction of his finger. The directors were utterly shocked to discover that above the dense fog of the Sage's cemetery, dozens of pale land masses, different in color from the sky, were dramatically rolling up, merging at the very center of the sky, completely enclosing the entire cemetery, blocking every possible exit. A huge bounty. Seeing the directors of the Cleaner Bureau in Sage's cemetery, all looking up with shock in their eyes, the overlords of the dead realm participating in the encirclement couldn't help showing sheer joy. Originally, they only hoped to capture the food god and deal with the 2 directors protecting him. They never expected there would be 4 directors inside the Sage's cemetery. What's even more wonderful is that among these 4 directors, 2 are aged and shrouded in death energy, while the other 2 have souls with anomalies and filled with flaws. Facing overlords skilled in death and souls, these 4 problematic directors of the Cleaner Bureau might not even be able to exert half of their strength. Even the weakest overlord could give them a hard time. 12 against 4. Losing this battle seems almost impossible. Attack! Seeing the group of old, weak, sick, and disabled directors below, The corners of the faceless man's mouth twitched upward slightly. Without hesitation, he led the overlords of the Dead Realm in a full-scale attack aimed at the sage's cemetery. Boom! As the faceless man's raised arm fell, a palace made of countless twisted bones arose from the depths of a dark forest hung with corpses. Then funeral music for the dead played, and a legion of unwilling deceased deprived of their shells and flesh merged with tens of thousands of ancient tombstones, forming an endless tide of corpses embarking both by land and water. They surged with soul-burning blue flames like a tidal wave, turning the tranquil cemetery into a sea of the dead. Well then, looking at the surrounding tide of deceased, charging frantically with endless death, and the overlords of the Dead Realm following behind, the directors exchanged glances, then couldn't hold back their laughter. This is a massive windfall. It seems something's not quite right. Amid the astonished gazes of the overlords of the realm of the dead, the few board members trapped within the sage's cemetery, with no escape, did not show a hint of despair. Instead, they launched a fierce counterattack. Protect me! Suddenly stepping forward, the weakest among the 4 board members, Pisces Director, opened her mouth. Her deep pink tongue split from the tip into 2, tearing into 4 peach-colored serpents without purpose, and the first of the 8 serpent mouths suddenly opened wide. 1. Accompanied by a light whispering count from the first serpent mouth, the multitude of the dead, manipulated by the masters of death, suddenly paused in their attacks, as if their bones were extracted, exuding a heavy sense of fatigue. Stop her quickly! As a formal member of the Slaughter King Association, the reincarnated doe, well acquainted with the trump cards of the Clearing Bureau, recognized what Pisces Director held in her mouth at a glance, and was horrified. We can't let her keep counting. If she reaches 8, the entire realm of the dead will be dragged into dreams. We'll all have to sleep. That doe. She can even recognize the dream plate tongue? Upon hearing the reincarnated doe's shout, Taurus Director's face momentarily darkened, knowing that this was mostly the previous Aquarius Director's fault. Some selfish old bastard likely betrayed Bureau's intel in order to gain the trust of the Slaughter King Association, and even disclosed information about Anomalous Object 008. But never mind, it doesn't matter even if they recognize it. After observing the attacks launched by the overlords of the realm of the dead, Taurus Director took up the old pouch in her hand, solemnly shaking it to scatter and suspend its contents around the 4 of them. Meanwhile, Guardian Director extended his hand before she tossed the items. Touching these bizarre things one by one, he performed enhancements using Guardian's secret technique. Thud, thud, thud. With a sound similar to arrows hitting a target, the golden arrow patterns flowed freely from the Guardian Director's fingers onto the anomalous objects brought out by Taurus Director. 7 or 8 bizarre anomalous objects were bathed in a radiant golden hue like sunlight. Next, amid the bewildered expressions of all the dead, aside from a peculiar little bell that remained guarding the board members, the other strange golden objects began to move as if they were alive. The first disturbance came from a silver matchbox. After coughing several times like an elderly person nearing their end, this unknown anomalous object suddenly flipped open, spewing clusters of silver flame toward the dead approaching. Before these strange silver flames, the cold flames, which had flowed out from the lantern of the old lamp-bearer and turned into a ghostly blue ocean, had almost no resistance. They were instantly ignited from the burning souls of the dead, forcing the lamp-bearer to release it and retreat hurriedly. Following closely, a bundle of scale-adorned coarse hemp rope was unleashed. As Taurus Director let it loose, the deep yellow hemp rope wriggled like large pythons, plunging into the dull-colored river of death, swimming upstream to drag out the alarmed burrowing worm. Then, the usefulness of a shriveled apple seed thrown to the ground was displayed. As Taurus Director tossed it onto the ground, under the puzzled gazes of the dead, the tiny seed rapidly took root and sprouted, growing wildly. In just a moment, it broke the surface and became a towering tree, bearing a strange fruit that seemed full of flesh and blood. The flesh of the red apple quickly rotted away, revealing the dark green apple seed inside. Amid the creaky sound of the apple tree's branches breaking apart, The seed fell once again to the soil, taking root and sprouting and starting another cycle. Meanwhile, the White Bone Palace, controlled by the reincarnated doe, also like this apple seed, rapidly grew large nerves and flesh from its skeletal roots, only to rot back into eerie white bones along with the apple's decay. As the bones forming itself grew flesh and rotted, the towering skeletal structure collapsed instantly, revealing the reincarnated doe inside, whose skin split uncontrollably, half its body already decomposed to expose white bone. "Help me! Help me! Don't move!" Crashing through the collapsing White Bone Palace and dragging out the screaming reincarnated doe. The faceless man with a golden mask affixed to his face tugged at the mask while staring at the distant tourist director through it. His sunken eyes reflected deep shadows. Tourist director, truly the second-ranked among the 12 directors of the Bureau. Though she lacks the terrifying abnormal destruction of Ares director, she excels in crafting anomalous objects, and regarding the variety and richness of her methods, she arguably stands unmatched within the entire Bureau. The Taurus director, loaded with anomalous items, and Sagittarius director, who can specifically enhance anomalous objects, are undoubtedly the best and most suitable partners. Just the two of them combined can suppress 6 overlords of the realm of the dead, instantly subduing several of the weaker ones. If I had arrived any later, the severely injured reincarnated doe, still recuperating, would likely have been eaten alive by that cursed apple. Tossing the bone-exposing reincarnated doe far away from the range of the blood apple, the faceless man glanced at the suppressed overlords of the realm of the dead and the Pisces director who had advanced to 5. He couldn't help but look toward the other end of the sage's cemetery where the grafter was. Understood. Returning a knowing expression to the faceless man, the tall grafter rose from the fallen tombstone woods, clashing the stone hammer and iron chisel in his hands. Amid piercing noise, he called toward Pisces director. Accompanied by the grafter's silent call, the souls of Taurus director and Pisces director, already unstable, both revealed expressions of pain, wavering unsteadily. Though when they noticed something was amiss, the little bell next to Taurus director immediately moved over, its bell-like resonant chime erupting to block the grafter's call in time. Yet, the 6th serpent mouth on Pisces director's tongue closed, slowly retracting into her mouth. "Bluff."
Sorry.
Bending painfully, she spat out a small piece of chaotic soul fragments. The pale-faced Pisces director straightened, wiped the filth from her mouth, and said apologetically, "It seems they figured me out. Someone was calling Mimi and the others by name, tearing the conduit through which we shared power, relying solely on my own strength. I can't hold the dream plate tongue for the 7th count. It's okay. You did your best. It's my fault for not protecting you." After offering a word of comfort to the Pisces director, the Taurus director watched the yellow python, transformed from the hemp rope, break free, and the burrowing yellow earthworm return to the underworld. He sighed with a hint of regret. The soul worn away by the Watcher's Palace is really difficult to recover. My current strength is probably less than half of what it was at my peak, and even though I've emptied my reserves, I couldn't even take down one overlord of the dead realm. Joan, you also did your best. Seeing her disappointment, the Cancer director patted his belly and said with a chuckle, "At least you 3 did something." I stood there the whole time without even moving my feet. Of course, it's not because I'm afraid of dying. Mainly, I have the desire of the belly god inside me, and the next generation of little guys hasn't learned the secret technique yet. So if I can survive, I need to try and live a few more days. You don't mind, do you? We don't mind. Responding expressionlessly, the Sagittarius director looked at the freed overlords of the dead realm gathering around again and asked, with furrowed brows, "Your continued existence is your greatest contribution to the Bureau. What's going on with Capricorn and the others? Why haven't they acted yet?" "Don't talk nonsense. I've been acting for a long time." An arm with little flesh or muscle draped over the Sagittarius director's shoulder, patting the mark on his collarbone. The Capricorn director, who had appeared without anyone noticing, smiled warmly and explained, "You and Cancer are too old. The smell of decay on you can't be concealed, and those overlords of the dead realm take one look and see it. How could they not take advantage of it? From the very start, Grandma Crow-Eye and the Death Workshop Master were cozying up to the deathly aura on you, trying to take your souls away early. If I hadn't noticed something was wrong and promptly left the others behind to purify you both a few rounds, you might already be down by now. Seemingly quite unaccustomed to such intimacy, the Sagittarius director shrugged off the Capricorn director's hand with a shoulder shrug, their face looking somewhat displeased. Then I thank you. Where are the others? Why aren't they acting? They're just about to. Not taking offense at being brushed off, the Capricorn director retracted his hand, smiling as he said, "Here comes a blast." Just as the Capricorn director was halfway through his words, the pale ground beneath the sage's cemetery suddenly quaked, and 7 blazing white beams pierced through the earth, shooting straight into the black and gray entwined sky, illuminating the terrifying faces of the overlords of the dead realm. Here comes the shot. With the Capricorn director finishing his words, the 7 golden beams suddenly contracted inward and converged in the darkest place in the sky, forming a head-sized blazing white hemisphere. In the blink of an eye, faster than a millionth of a second could register in the pupils of all the living and the dead, this small 7/12 sun emitted an unbelievably pure sunlight under the desperate gaze of the overlords of the dead realm. The next moment, the sky of the dead realm lit up. Under the half-sun pushed out by the joint efforts of the 7 zodiac directors of the Cleanup Bureau, the dazzling sunlight belonging only to the living world shone once again into this dark world full of death, after countless ages. The originally cloud-shrouded sky of the dead realm was instantly illuminated, the heavy, gray sky seemingly washed clean of dirt, shedding its murky darkness, and briefly revealing a clear, light blue. As the deathly aura saturating the world was temporarily cleansed by the sunlight, the pale earth quickly turned black, the polluted yellow spring purged of silt. Even the shadowy mountains leading from the ground to the sky briefly exuded a hint of green. Even the deceased with various expressions along the ruptured no-return path found their missing flesh restored, their resentment and regret smoothed over, revealing the appearance of their healthy selves in life, staring blankly at the brightening sky. All done. Rubbing his eyes that were tearing up from the sunlight, the Capricorn director grinned widely, then gave Leon's coffin a thumbs up. Ha ha ha, Aquarius's plan is quite perfect. I just took an extra look, and nearly all the overlords of the dead realm were directly hit by the solar light accumulated by 7 zodiac star palaces, and even the strongest among them, like the faceless man and the sculptor, would be completely done after such a hit. Now the dead realm is without overlords. All those guys above, one by one, have been burned to a crisp. Although the sunlight didn't carry much power to erode their souls, without 100 or 80 years. Huh? Why aren't you talking? Why are you ignoring me again? I didn't babble any nonsense today, did I? Shut up. Be quiet. Wait until your eyes are better and see for yourself. After shouting the chattering Capricorn director in unison, the other directors, looking up at the rapidly dimming sky after the sun disappeared, couldn't help but have their expressions darken. 1, 2, 3, 12. In the sky not yet fully blackened again, 12 dark ink dots were quietly suspended directly above the sage's cemetery, exuding an unbelievably intense deathly aura. And as the sunlight completely disappeared, the layers of ice that froze the overlords of the dead realm in the sky shattered and melted, raining down a dull, pitch-black shower onto the hearts of all the Cleanup Bureau members. Hit directly by the 7/12 of the sun, yet not a single overlord of the dead realm perished. They seem to have mastered some powerful trump card, perfectly withstanding our ambush, and their aura has grown purer, exuding a terrifying might comparable to the Pillar Gods. Sigh. With a light sigh of regret, the smile remaining on the face of the Cancer director shook his head, and then pressed his navel with a solemn expression, gently rotating counterclockwise. Intense sounds of slaughter and wailing emanated from the prison of the belly god. Subsequently, except for the Capricorn director, who was frantically rubbing his eyes, all members of the Cleanup Bureau, including the 7 zodiac directors emerging from underground after opening the coffins, looked up at the pitch-black sky and silently took out their main combat abnormal items. At this moment, no one regretted starting this war, and no one blamed the new Aquarius director's plan. Everyone involved in this action, whether Zodiac directors or the 12 directors, understood that what they had to do next was only one thing, and that was to face a deadly. Watching the overlords of the dead realm, who fell like dumplings after breaking from the ice layer, before the cleaners could show their puzzled expressions, they saw the last faceless man who broke free catch the falling lantern old man beside him and swallow him in one gulp. Wait, when did it get a mouth? We've been tricked. Looking down at the astonished cleaners gazing upward, the faceless man, whose face was gloomy, couldn't help but puff out his cheeks and chew forcefully a few times. The sound of fine bones breaking mingled with the despairing screams of the lamp-bearing old man, which ceased abruptly in an instant. If I haven't guessed wrong, everything I encountered earlier was likely a premeditated ambush. Whether it was the Pisces director who left the Sage's cemetery to check on the situation at the no-return path, or the food god hiding in the coffin flirting with a woman, or the 4 old and weak directors of the cleaning bureau, all of it was fake. The cleaning bureau must have somehow detected our movements in advance, and staged this play to disarm our vigilance, luring me to bring all the overlords of the dead realm into the Sage's cemetery. And if it weren't for arranging an ambush beforehand and distributing 1/3 of the first deceased's remains to other overlords for safekeeping, just that half-sun would have been enough to turn everyone into ashes. But this isn't too bad as it is. The faceless man expressionlessly stuffed a still gently beating black heart into his mouth, and his facial features quickly became defined, swiftly transforming towards a human male appearance. Meanwhile, the other overlords of the dead realm who emerged from the black ice layers also regained their mobility, as 5 of them grabbed the nearest overlord, expressionlessly stuffed them into their mouths, and began chewing with crunching sounds. Strangely, as they began to eat rapidly, whether it was a sculptor with chiseled features or a death hall host whose face was wrapped in a shroud, their own faces started to blur, gradually transitioning to resemble the current appearance of the faceless man. Even the Coleoptera worms at their face without distinct features, under some bizarre powers repair, the bulging flesh on their face was smoothing out rapidly, vaguely forming some human-like attributes. If the Quarter Leon pushed off the cliff of the end were here, he would likely spot at a glance that the faces of these 6 overlords, including the faceless man who now had a face, bore an 8/10 resemblance to the face of the first deceased. As for the remaining 20% of differences, they lay in the teeth and eyeballs of the overlords. Each of these faces with an uncanny resemblance to the first deceased bore a pair of sharp, long, ghastly white fangs. Also, their eyes resembled those of cervids, with the black part of their irises rapidly expanding, squeezing out the sclera to fill their eye sockets completely, paired with the sharp fangs, resembling 6 short-eared deer with human faces. These little things look strangely familiar. Glancing up at the 6 overlords of the dead realm in the sky, the old man who had remained detached from the start couldn't help but frown thoughtfully, feeling like he'd seen something similar somewhere before. Meanwhile, the other individuals in the Sage's cemetery, having snapped out of the astonishment from witnessing the overlords devouring each other, activated their strongest supernatural abilities without hesitation, and began a second wave of attacks in concert. Splash! From the grave river briefly cleansed of its muddy hue by half a sun, suddenly gushed vast torrents of briny seawater. Hundreds of massive octopus tentacles emerged from the sea eye, stretching towards the 6 overlords above. Even before reaching their target, the many flesh-colored suckers on the tentacles bizarrely folded and pinched themselves, opening up and closing like eyelids to reveal tens of thousands of blood-red vertical eyes, which kept a close watch on everything above the Sage's cemetery. Following this, a colossal rift abruptly tore through the pitch-black sky of the dead realm, and a dazzling river of gold, accompanied by shattered mannequins and pure white feathers, cascaded down, as if intending to engulf and melt the entire cemetery. Next came the bronze masks swooping down like crow birds, 2 groups of blindfolded nuns kneeling and praying mournfully, over 100 bone-faced demons with their eyes gouged out and tongues severed, a path of thorns impaled with various severed feet, dozens of dilapidated altars etched with hollow blood moons. Following the attack by the Zodiac directors, whose forms appeared more eldritch than outer gods and auras fouler than demons, was Capricorn director, who raised his withered, skeletal hands. Joan! With veins bulging at his neck, Capricorn Director shouted, his gleaming white hands clenching abruptly, dispelling the nearly icy thickness of deathly aura surrounding the faceless man, exposing him completely. However, just as the Taurus Director drew a rustic longbow, aided by the Sagittarius Director in half-drawing it, intending to forcibly shoot the seemingly most dangerous faceless man, the sculptor beside the faceless man suddenly raised his hand and slashed downward forcefully with a gleaming silver carving knife. No, that's not right. In the abruptly wide eyes of the Taurus Director, a somewhat familiar aura of a gash, crossing at least several hundred meters, and numerous defensive supernatural abilities laid out in advance, landed precisely on the back of the bow in her hands. Crack! After a crisp crack, the rustic longbow, already half-drawn, died instantly, shattering into dozens of deep bronze fragments under tension, uncontrollably splattering around and deeply lodging into her flesh, leaving her hands and forearms bruised and bleeding. Directly above Taurus Director, Grandma Crow-Eye, who previously held average true god power, abruptly opened her eyes and surveyed the surroundings, casting a glance at the imminent attacks. Among the astonished expressions of the cleaners, wherever Grandma Crow-Eye's gaze fell, whether it was the massive tentacles or scattered feathers, whether it was the golden river or the thorny path, all lost control. These attacks, which could heavily injure any true god, seemed influenced by some irresistible lure, peculiarly altering their direction and target, bypassing the bodies of the 6 overlords entirely and rushing straight to the deepest part of the dead realm. I understand now. Observing the 6 overlords standing in the sky, a realization dawned on the square-headed old man's face. He then looked up towards the faceless man, shouting in amazement, "Are you the 6-faced elephant deer? You're not dead." 6-faced elephant deer? Upon hearing this somewhat unfamiliar name, the cleaners paused, a puzzle evident in their eyes. Meanwhile, Leon, repairing his soul in the coffin, felt his heart skip a beat, recalling the cutting silver dagger acquired from the former Aquarius Director, the overlord of the dead realm who hated the endless labor of the realm and, in the end, chose to jump off the cliff to commit suicide, leaving behind 6 true god-level supernatural items? It's me. Faced with the inquiry of the 3rd-generation old man, the 6 overlords of the dead realm in the sky nodded in unison, as if they were one person, and then bowed slightly toward the 3rd-generation Director, speaking in a nearly impassive tone. I didn't expect after so long, you could still remember me. What's so hard about remembering you? The 3rd-generation old man rolled his eyes at these words. I just died. I didn't get senile. Speaking of which, didn't you jump off a cliff? How come you're back now, and turned from 1 into 6? That's something I have to thank you for. With a blank expression, the carver holding a small knife answered. Back then, out of respect for the first deceased, you didn't kill me but placed a restriction on my soul, preventing me from stepping into the living world ever again. I could only stay in this boring world, serving you humans forever. I didn't want to live through such endless torment, so I chose to jump off the cliff of the end, wanting to end it all and put a total stop to that mind-numbing existence. But unexpectedly, the restriction you left was unimaginably stronger than I thought. Even when my soul was shattered by the cliff of the end, the remnants that fell to the bottom couldn't return to the living world and were forcefully confined to the realm of the dead, scattered within the power I once wielded. And when the 6 death authorities I once held were inherited by new deceased souls, my will was divided into 6, merging slowly with the inheritors of my powers, making me both the 6-faced elephant deer and the 6 overlords of the dead realm who inherited its will. Ah, now I see. Ignoring the hateful gaze of the 6 overlords, the 3rd-generation Director scratched the side of his square head, nodded knowingly, and then analyzed with interest. I should have thought of it earlier. These 6 overlords of death have indeed each inherited a part of your power. Let me see. The faceless man's black and white bridge must be your reflecting face, mirroring the memories of the deceased when they were alive. The concealing master's corridor of the deceased is probably concealing face, the part for funeral and burial, while Grandma Crow-Eye is likely guiding face, still responsible for leading the deceased. As for the remaining judging, purifying, and commemorating faces, They are precisely for engraving stones and judging life and death, digging springs and cleansing sins, commemorating plaques and recalling obstacles. Although they've changed quite a bit compared to you back then, upon closer examination, they indeed came from those things of yours.
Six Fasala Panday, Nobunde. Ah.
After analyzing the situation of the 6 overlords, the 3rd-generation old man continued stirring his big pot, then said with a chuckle, I wonder why the realm of the dead has been so restless, even causing the first deceased, who was like a clay man, to die. Turns out it was your handiwork. So what are your plans? Are you going to take revenge for back then? Faced with the 3rd-generation old man's inquiry, the 6 overlords, or rather, the divided 6-faced elephant deer remained silent for a while before collectively staring at the 3rd-generation director below and speaking in varied tones. What if I say yes? Then I'll just die. Under the stunned gaze of everyone, the 3rd-generation director stopped stirring the strange substance forming in the pot, spread his hands with a rather helpless expression, and said, You are extremely powerful now, while I, the old man, have been dead for who knows how many years. All that's left is a bit of an obsession. What else can I do but wait to die? Lord Taurus. Hearing this, Taurus, who was healing her hands on the side, couldn't help but interject. You don't have to say such things. Even if we have to fight to the death. Don't fight. There's no point in fighting. Cutting off Taurus, the 3rd-generation old man raised his hand and pointed upward, saying with a sigh, These beings have risen to prominence. From the looks of them, they must have devoured the corpse the first deceased left behind, absorbing the essence accumulated in the realm of the dead over the years, becoming even more powerful than the first deceased at his peak. Faced with such troublesome opponents, even if I were in my prime, winning would have been extremely taxing. You're too weak or too old or too sick to stand a chance against these creatures. Just stay here obediently with me. Looking up at the silent 6-faced elephant deer, realizing that the 3rd-generation director's assessment might be correct, Taurus couldn't help but feel a wrenching ache in her heart. Yet she still gritted her teeth and said, We have no retreat left. It's a life and death struggle for us, so even life and death struggles can be negotiated. It doesn't necessarily have to result in a fight, at least not immediately. Placing a hand on Taurus's shoulder to signal her not to act rashly, the 3rd-generation old man squinted at the 6-faced elephant deer above and insinuated, So what do you say? Are you more inclined to come down and take revenge? Or would you rather first visit the living world? Lord 3rd Generation? Hearing the 3rd-generation director's words, the cleaners couldn't help but stir. The overlords of the dead realm are the embodiments of death itself, and no matter how they restrain their powers, their presence inevitably brings vast amounts of death. With the 6-faced elephant deer's current state, allowing it into the living world would result in an unimaginable toll in lives. Don't forget, this is the realm of the dead, their home turf. Facing the angry and shocked glances from the directors and board, the 3rd-generation director shrugged helplessly, pointing at the 6-faced elephant deer above, reminding them, This being has consumed all the other overlords of the dead realm except itself, mastering at least 90% of the death authorities, equating to a fully powered pillar god, with an astoundingly deep pocket, not only unafraid of depletion but able to infinitely regenerate. You might technically be able to fight a bit, but as long as it remains in the dead realm, you can only delay and cannot win. Victory is utterly impossible, but if it goes to the living world, it would be like a fish out of water, severing its support from the dead realm's rules. Moreover, the sun and the living in the real world will significantly weaken its power. Once in the living world, you can gain strength from the Star Palace, flipping the situation to make defeating it nearly effortless. So, I'd say, instead of being at a bloody all-out fight here, it'd be better to let it have a stroll in the living world. But that would surely lead to casualties, and many would die, but what other choice do you have? Continuing to stir the contents of the pot, the 3rd-generation old man responded in a calm tone. If you don't let it into the living world, all of you, including myself, will die. None will be left. Without the Clearing Bureau's protection, even if by some miracle you win, surviving in the future will be more painful than death given the state of the living world. But by letting it into the living world, although many will die, at worst even half the population might be lost, you can survive and in turn eliminate it. As for those who die, when he got to this point, the third-generation director paused slightly, then said expressionlessly, "There will always be new humans born, right? New humans will always be born." Faced with this seemingly self-evident, yet extraordinarily cruel notion, the thoroughly shattered sage's cemetery plunged into a deathly silence. Those who can become cleaners and sit in the position of Zodiac Branch Office Director cannot be utterly foolish. They must possess relatively sound judgment. Thus, all present understood that the proposal of the third-generation director, though extremely cruel, was indeed the best choice at the moment. When confronting the six-faced elephant deer, supported by the entire realm of the dead, even a lucky victory would come with heavy casualties. The directors Sagittarius, Pisces, and others with inherent problems would certainly perish, wiping out the core strength of the Cleaning Bureau. At that point, the real world might become a playground for outer gods. Therefore, the only way was to abandon obstructing the six-faced elephant deer, letting it go to the real world and indirectly severing its connection with the realm of the dead, which was the only way to protect humanity and the real world. But no! Taurus, the director, was the first to break the silence, grabbing the floating cardboard clock beside her, her hand veins bulging, her once kind and gentle face now as hard as iron. "Over my dead body. Sigh." Glancing at Taurus's white-knuckled fingers, Sagittarius, who had been standing by her side, hesitated momentarily and then shook his head, saying, "I agree to let it pass. But I'll stay here with you." In Taurus's astonished expression, Sagittarius reached out to touch the small clock, while applying Sagittarius Palace's enhancement secret technique, his face expressionless. "Letting it go to the real world is correct, but once it's there, we'll still have to fight, and I don't have much longer to live. Dying anywhere would be the same." "Ahaha! You finally spoke like a human." Laughing, Cancer stepped forward, stood beside Taurus, and then reached out to completely twist open his navel. As the divine prison of his abdomen fully opened, countless hideous demons full of evil aura crawled out from his gaping navel like pitch-black, ugly ants. They used their 6 limbs to climb out, covering every inch of Cancer's skin, roaring with hatred at everything around them. "For the past 50 years, no matter what you guys think, I for one have had enough of being cowardly." Cancer shut his mouth, and the dense, tiny demons on his skin all painfully opened their mouths, issuing an ear-piercing voice unlike human speech. "Fight first, talk about other things after death." "Pisces, what do you think?" Looking at Cancer, who turned his head towards him, the aged Pisces sighed and then shook his head slightly, saying, "I'm still the same as before, standing with you all." "Then let's fight." Ignoring Capricorn's seeming desire to say something, Sagittarius stepped on Leon's coffin lid that was about to be lifted. He left a secret technique-enhanced golden footprint on it, then looked around calmly, inquiring, "This task ends here. The next task will be executed by us directors. We will hold back the 6-faced elephant deer shortly. Those who wish to leave can do so on their own." Leave? After hearing Sagittarius, the Zodiac Bureau directors looked at each other, then shook their heads in succession. If sacrificing a small portion of humanity could solve the 6-faced elephant deer, some might choose to leave, but currently the weight on the scale was too heavy. Faced with the result of possibly losing half of humanity, the answer was naturally only one. As for whether staying would mean death, a cleaner afraid of dying would have died in a task hundreds of years ago. How could they even become the Zodiac Bureau director? No one's leaving? That really complicates things. Raising his head to look at the silent 6-faced elephant deer above, Sagittarius frowned slightly, glancing around at the 7 Zodiac Bureau directors before finally locking eyes on the Scorpio director. "Edward." After kicking the thumping coffin of Leon towards him, Sagittarius, with a face allowing no refusal, said, Aquarius is different from us. He cannot die here. I assign you the task of bringing him to the real world. I'll also stay. You better not stay. Cutting off the Scorpio director, Sagittarius couldn't help but frown, saying, You lack power. What I mean is, your primary combat tool is a puppet that controls the living, which is useless against the dead six-faced elephant deer, so staying has little meaning. You might as well return to the real world and wait until we come back after the fight. Aye. You should go, Edward. Kindly advising him, Taurus then stepped on Leon's coffin lid, pressing back the blade tips protruding from it, then scattered a few silver nails, reinforcing Leon's coffin for the second time, before turning to glance at Cancer. Understood. Nodding knowingly at Taurus, Cancer scratched his belly, plucking 6 demons from it and throwing them out. These 6 pitch-black demons swelled rapidly, together lifting Leon's coffin on their shoulders. Go, Edward. Joining in the fun, Cancer left a shoe mark on Leon's coffin, then raised his chin in a nod at Edward, the reluctant Scorpio director, and grinned, making a cheerful promise. As long as you bring the future of humanity back, you'll be the hero, ranked first in the year-end review. Pisces, want to leave a mark? No, thanks. Facing the seemingly childlike antics of the old friend, Pisces shook his head helplessly, then gently touched the heart of the Scorpio director and Leon's coffin, leaving behind a string of colorful bubbles, afterwards solemnly advising, I leave my bubble shadow cove with you. If the 6-faced elephant deer chases after you, this should withstand a full-force attack from a pillar god level. Go. Okay. Faced with the persuasion of the 4 directors, the Scorpio director could only nod, flicking a few invisible threads from his fingertips onto the 6 demons carrying the coffin. 6-faced elephant deer. After the Scorpio director secured the 6 demons and prepared for departure, Cancer, covered in demons, was the first to step out of the sage's cemetery, looking up at the 6 figures motionless above. Come. Show us the power of the Lord of Death. Hee. Faced with Cancer's challenge, the previously silent, faceless man suddenly chuckled for some unknown reason. He didn't bother with the disappearing coffin, but instead remarked with some emotion, The people of the cleaning bureau really are getting worse with each generation.